Welcome to the jungle. We have fun and games. We got and that's all I'm gonna say because otherwise, even that crappy rendition might get recognized. Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another Lore Ramblings. Name's Adam.
And I'm
I'm in,
Tech Priest.
and I'm in sit.
And I only just, I think, 20 minutes ago figured out via revelations from Tech what version of Chicago by Night we're going to look at.
We're going back to the very beginning. This is one of the first books ever published by White Wolf, and I think that after we've done as much as we have with Chronicles and Eras, especially, that looking at the first ever setting book done for any White Wolf product is a good start.
Yeah,
Well,
I
more
thought it made
accurately,
a lot
a
of
good
sense
follow up because
because,
we're almost done with Dark Eras. Almost done. We just have one more section left, and then we'd basically be getting to the time period that this is set in anyway. So
yeah, it kind of
little
fits
of that.
because of that. Uh,
Yeah, it's
Also, it's
also a very
interesting to
thorough
look
setup.
at because, let's be fair, this is one of the very first books besides just Vampire the Masquerade that they made. This is before
Yes, it
they
is.
even thought about werewolves being playable. Like, this is back when it is just vampire. Like, the
It
Sabbat,
is.
they're not even fluffed at this point in time. If there's any references, it's actually closer to what eventually became the Bali than anything else. Like, that's how
Yeah,
early this is.
this is incredibly early. You can tell how incredibly early it is as well if you take a look at the table of contents.
So
That's what it goes right to.
let's
And the
take a look
dedication.
at the cover, which very nice. I actually really like there's elements of watercoloring in here that I really like.
It's a very classic cover. Like again, what I'm going to say is that early White Wolf has some fantastic art, and this is like of the art. If you can't see it because you're listening to this, it's a Bela Lugosi style like guy in a suit in a getting thrown out of a skyscraper window
God, he has a cloak. He
with
has
a
a cloak.
he has a cloak with a stake through his heart.
You see lightning arcing in the sky.
There's lightning arcing in the sky. It's very
You see the
the
neon
perspective's all
city of
weird.
Chicago.
Yeah, the perspective's all weird and wonky, and it's good art. It's just that like the more you look at it, the more you're like, okay, this looks a little fucky. But
Also because of the fact that it seems to be that there's another city on the other side of Chicago.
No, that's supposed to be the Chicago
that's
skyline.
Chicago skyline. But the problem is the perspective.
Is wrong.
They have the they fucked up on the perspective.
This book was made in honor of. This is right after their initial sales. They noticed a shitload of books were bought in the Chicago area.
To some degree, yes, but also because Chicago itself is a very gothic style of city in many ways.
There's a
Chicago is
reason
Yeah,
a
why there's a reason why the Batman movies done by Nolan were filmed in Chicago.
yeah, Chicago is very much a city that was built in blood in when you think about it, because the reason why it became so big was slaughter yards. Yeah,
I mean, it was at the nexus
and
point of a river system, and on top of that, it's surrounded by farmlands. So
and
yeah.
and not only that, but there's the Great Chicago Fire.
the fur
There's
trade too.
the
That's another thing. Like slaughter was its
Yeah,
lifeblood.
there's the labor movements, and also the violent response to the labor movements.
there's of course
Then
Upton
there's
Sinclair's The Jungle, which they of course.
I mean, that was more
yeah,
based on some of Well, I think that was more based on like the Californian conditions, but they easily applied to Chicago.
then
Chicago is just
yeah,
as bad, if not worse.
then there's
Uh,
the Democratic Convention of 1968, and
Oh, you
then
come on, man! You skipped the Chicago outfit, dude. You skipped the
yeah,
St.
that's right, yeah,
Valentine's Day massacre.
you
yeah.
skipped the violence in Chicago back during the Roaring Twenties and 30s. There was Chicago's.
Chicago had the dockyards around the Great Lakes, which allowed it very much easy access for rum runners. In fact, more
Yeah,
so than crossing the land border. There's a reason Al
yeah.
Capone made this his little private kingdom.
Speaking of Capone, we'll get to him in this book, actually.
But yeah, you can definitely tell the age because boom, look at that table of contents.
Look
It
at look at
feels
that table of contents.
Where's
Look
the
at the
page number?
formatting.
there's
It
no
is
page number.
literal.
It's
There's
just
no
bullet
page
points,
number.
baby.
And it is dedicated to Upton Sinclair, one of the first to reveal Chicago's vampiric conspiracies.
Which is a little nod of the wackiness that White Wolf can get. Because let's be fair, this is also the period in time they made Louis Pasteur a vampire.
Yep, that actually came out before this book did. The reference, the adventure Ashes to Ashes actually has some tie-ins to Chicago by Night.
Oh yeah, well actually,
Um,
to give you an idea, one of the very most common, like early on in White Wolf history, this is kind of the thing, one of the earliest setups that a normal storyteller during the 90s would do with this is they take Chicago by Night, link it with Ashes to Ashes, and there's one other book they usually did besides the Player's Handbook. I forget
it
the
was
name of it.
usually
I think it's the one with the child vampire.
I don't know off
No,
the top
that's
of
New
my
York.
head,
I
but
got it wrong. That's New York, I think. Which came out
in any
later.
case, yeah, in any case, it was usually this book,
Oh, Al
Ashes to
Capone. What
Ashes.
vampire was Al Capone? Oh, all
Well,
of them.
you'll see. The
Yes.
but yeah, this and Ashes to Ashes usually is or whatever
You usually tag between them. Like your first adventures are usually combined with this. At least the original White Wolf experience, the original first edition vampire experience, you combine this with Ashes to Ashes.
yeah, or
Child
whatever the title is.
vampires
I
are
want
not
to say it's
are
Ashes to
not
Ashes,
illegal at
but
all. In fact, it's totally fine to. It's a bad idea.
Because they're stuck as a child.
Hmm.
Anyone's seen Interview with a
yeah,
Vampire, they'll know why.
yeah. There it's frowned upon for a variety of reasons, and in some domains it can get you final death. In others, it is just considered like this is really
It's
repulsive.
gauche. It's just gauche.
Yeah,
Because remember,
Chicago.
at the core of
Because you could
things,
just,
they
if you
still
really
have some
wanted a child,
humanity.
you could just, yeah. Also, if you really wanted a child, you could just Ghoul them.
Yeah. Chapter 1, the
And
introduction. Like, this feels. You can definitely tell they got their hands on an old. Not. This isn't in the style of an RPG book. This is actually more in the style of a novel. The formatting is very much novel style.
Hmm.
Have you noticed
yes,
that?
You know what?
yes,
Yeah, I'm seeing
it
that
is one
now.
of the things about this book that's kind of unique is that there's no other real book that you can see that has this sort of style. When it comes to setting books, this is a very unique book in that it is their first attempt to do a setting book, and and they kind of nail it. You have to understand that this is one of the books that, for a lot of people, sold them on Vampire. Uh,
Yeah, this is
they
this is one of their best sellers. There's a reason it was reprinted for second edition, and why they actually leaned hard onto it in fifth edition. Because remember, they were trying to stoke that nostalgia.
It's also that Chicago is just a very large metropolitan area, as they mentioned in this book. While it
Yeah,
is situated in Illinois, it has suburbs in both Wisconsin and Indiana. It's part of a metroplex that includes much of the area along the entire southwest edge of Lake Michigan.
which
From
includes
Gary to
which includes linking you to Milwaukee, the trash fire that's
and
Gary, Indiana.
yeah,
Didn't they get setting books as
uh,
well?
Milwaukee did.
Milwaukee by night did.
Gary has already been described in the Vampire Rulebook as the introductory adventure, and Milwaukee will have its very own source book. Milwaukee by Night is a book that does exist, and we will cover it at some point because it is a weird book that it even exists, honestly. But
A lot of cities in first edition you wouldn't expect did get a book.
well, it's more that Milwaukee by Night kind of has this weird, like the name itself sounds weird.
Ah, I thought you were going to say it was similar to Vancouver by Night, which actually introduced. This is a cool thing that
Van,
first edition Vampire did. Let me finish. A first edition Vampire, and for some reason in Vancouver by Night, actually had an entire section on how to design your own disciplines.
yes, it
Because
did.
that's the book I think that actually seriously introduced KT for the first time.
Yes, Caitiff are actually mentioned and shown in here, but they're more like anarchs. There's a lot of stuff in this book where it's like you can see where they're going to go in the later editions, but they haven't quite gotten
They
there
have
yet.
no idea at this point. So yeah, this
The
is the
one
source
of
book for Vampire.
yeah, of
This
course
is
they
not the
mention
Chicago of our real world, although it's very similar. Rather, it's a Chicago controlled and manipulated by vampires, where the history and politics are affected by the interventions and manipulation of the damned.
But what's different?
True. They control this city and rule it with an iron fist. I'm not seeing any differences yet. My nightmare glasses are off, and it looks the same. Help me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm turning my nightmare goggles on. Oh, it looks exactly the same.
Yeah, this is a city drawn in blood, and they actually go through. It's a city of culture, for the elders would have it no other way. The Toreadors value the many art museums because Chicago has a shitload of them. In fact, they had a very strong art scene in general. The Venture,
Yeah.
definitely. Bunch of nightclubs, a lot of restaurants.
Hmm.
And the Malkavians, they're intellectual coffee houses because they expected
I,
you to treat them with dignity and not have them dance down the stairs in a Joker costume before shooting someone with a toy gun. They expected you to give them some basic dignity at this point.
Yeah.
I
Most
know it's
aside from culture and
surprising.
wealth, they have brought darkness and evil. For every theater and art gallery, there are 3 nightclubs that cater to drug addicts and skinheads. Every elegant restaurant is matched by a seedy bar where the dregs of humanity waste their little money in pointless effort to erase their memories of the horrors around them.
Oh no,
Yeah,
they accidentally saw a flash mob dance. They have to drink.
yeah, this dichotomy suits the elders of Chicago well. They can live in refinement and taste in a city of culture they've helped nurture and can feed upon the dregs of the city that their greed helped create.
Which again is very much leaning into the same kind of stylings, that kind of almost quasi
Again,
Gilded Age
it's
that also inspired
it's the
Batman.
punk. It's the gothic punk element of Chicago. Like
Which is the
that's
same core. Again, this is the sort of thing that made Batman so damn popular. You see, and this is Chicago in a nutshell in general. You can
yeah,
literally walk a couple of blocks away and you see a massive difference between cities. It's
yeah.
almost like
Chicago
two
is
cities.
well,
yeah,
Chicago for in the 1990 census, the Chicago's population was almost 3 million people.
It
Right, that's
rivaled
not
New
the greater
York.
Chicago area, but 3 million people. It still is, I think, the second. No, it's like the third largest city in the country,
it's the third. Yeah,
which is impressive when you consider that it is the only one of those not on a coast, like an ocean coast.
Vancouver by
Yes, it's
night
on the Great
rules
Lake.
is a Sabbat ruled hellscape. Well, Canada in general is a Sabbat ruled hellscape.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm not joking when I
Chicago, of
say that.
course, was Chicago, of course, has a bunch of connections to industry, and there's the Sears or Tower, as it was called back then, and still a lot of people call it. It's like a different.
we
It's like the
call.
Willis Building now, or something like
I
that.
It's
But
called the Willis
I,
Building. I call it Sears Tower.
yeah,
everyone calls it Sears Tower.
I'm originally from that area. We call it the Sears Tower.
Oh,
So
here's
they
some
have
very nice
the
art, by the way, for those.
It's
A
always going to be
yes,
Sears.
little bit of animalism being not protean, protean.
Protean there. It's a very neat picture too. It's as I said, early White Wolf art has its own charm to it, especially because they took out all the stops. Like we have the guy in the sunglasses in a fucking trench coat, just after the cover. Really,
Just
uh,
looking at the reprint here, this digital PDF, you can kind of feel the cheap Penny Dreadful kind of
yeah, this is a
page.
scan of some kind. I think that
It's a scan of some kind, but you can tell from the paper quality it's very similar to a novel, which means you might see a little bleed on the behind.
yeah, it's this
It
is either
just
was
you
it
can
or either
feel
a
it.
very
I
well loved book or a very intentional thing, and either way, it's a great kind of feeling to it.
90% of the world is a spot rolled hellscape. Honestly, no, 105% of the world in World of Darkness is a hellscape. Let's be fair.
Yeah,
But yeah, Chicago, mainly because of the things like the Chicago fire and just massive amounts of urban planning. To give you an idea, the U.S. actually had a bit of an advantage because these are far newer cities, so you can kind of design them based on your dreams and whims.
And you
so
can
so
also
this is but yeah, for some of that early edition weirdness, Chicago more than any other Midwestern city has an indescribably gothic look to it. Perhaps it is some aspect of the vaulting rows of skyscrapers that constantly overcast skies, or it could be the gargoyles that guard the corners of many of its older brick buildings. In this
hmm
gothic punk city, they have not torn up a lot of the cobblestone streets, and many of the police still ride horses. They still have streetcars instead of buses, and the enormous St. Neris Cathedral looms over Washington Park.
Which I think was torn down at some point in real life,
Yeah,
or it's just bloody fictional. Let's be fair.
St.
yeah. Who
Nearest.
knows?
See. Um,
Either way, it don't matter. Uh, Either way,
It's a
it
Gothic from
really
Chicago.
leans into that older period where the cities had a different and darker look.
Yes. Early White Wolf was very much a everything in the world of darkness is like our world, but like with like the real
A
punk
shade
Gothic
darker.
aspect to it.
A shade darker.
Yeah, like in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, right? Like how LA looks in that game.
And why it's always so dreary and night? Yes, that's why.
Well, yeah, because you're a vampire, that's why it's night. But no, like I mean, like how the skyscrapers are like these weird Gothic, and they have them even in areas where they shouldn't, and things like that. Where it's like, yeah, that's because that's the sort of attitude and design ethos that they wanted out of the tabletop game.
And this early period, they really hammer it home because this is during a time where they can't rely on fans already knowing this.
Yeah. So this book has a number of uses. You might use it as an example how to create your own city. You would not actually use Chicago as a setting for Chronicle, but it would certainly give you ideas for a city of your choice. Of course, the source book is designed to allow you to run a Chronicle based in Chicago, or perhaps even a continuation of the Forged in Steel Chronicle described in the Vampire rulebook itself.
That's the other one. It's
However,
Forged in Steel, Ashes to Ashes in this book.
yes. Well, Forged in Steel was, I think, in the Vampire rulebook.
Yeah.
So, however, you should not accept everything the way it was written here. Then, if your players read this book, it will not ruin all surprises.
Basically, this is them telling them up front, and this is actually the people who wrote
This is actually
this.
good advice. Yeah.
Well, no, this is legitimately. If you ever wonder why I, Adam, never actually I've mentioned before, I never ever, when I cover any type of, I never do setting books. Like when I run games, I never do them because otherwise, you have that type of player. They exist that will metagame. They know everyone involved in the city, and they'll try to pretend that they do know them well enough to get around and navigate. And they're upfront stating, and this is something that you should do if you ever storytell, if you ever DM, GM, it doesn't matter what system you run. If you run a module, punish people who try to expect the story. Or have it go on a big twist. Never quite go for the exact direct path.
They then
And also suggest don't have them ask them not to read it if they haven't, because otherwise you lose a lot. Like, to give you an idea, there's a reason I've actually never touched this until relatively recently. I wanted to be surprised.
Yeah, again, this is the next thing at the contents of it. This book has 5 chapters. The first chapter serves as an introduction and explanation of the rest of the book. Chapter 2 summarizes the history with a particular emphasis on the role of the undead. Chapter 3 offers a brief geography, and Chapter 4 provides details of many of the city's more prominent Canaanites and their dealings with each other.
There's a lot of characters,
There's a lot of characters
And
in this book.
and a lot of them
and then
stuck around up to even into fifth.
Yes.
and then the other thing is, it says it's innovative, and I don't know if they've done this recently, but Chapter 5 is a series of encounter charts organized by theme.
This is kind of one of those things where this is very early 90s, late 80s style of game design, which is that every time in a GM book, you'd have this table of random encounters or whatever else. So they kind of gave you that, but they did do a nice twist on it, which I kind of appreciate.
Which I'll get to see blind because, again, I made again up front. I usually don't use setting books, so this is my first time actually seriously looking at any of these.
Yes, they also tell you that there's a lot of mundane detail about Chicago that you're going to have to get to yourself. So go out and do some research on your own. Which, again, as I've said
Similar to
before,
Requiem for Rome.
they're like go out and do some research if you want to. Like we're not going to stop you.
And also, like Requiem for Rome, you can literally just say "fuck it." This building was it the Stechkov building, built by the eccentric Russian architect who escaped the Soviet Union. That's done in a neo-futurist nightmare. Yeah, that building doesn't actually exist in Chicago, but fuck it, it's there now.
It's there now.
It works. It fits
Yeah,
the theme. It's this
it
weird
works.
alien-looking building dealing with this weird alien-looking vampire because he's a Zamichi.
Yeah.
There you go. That's an example of rule of theme, rule of cool.
Yeah. One of the things that I taught that they go is they like, okay, so depending on how Ashes to Ashes goes, you can kind of like you can skip the section that they got here, which is details about that or whatever else. They also have the theme, of course, and one of the themes that they say about this book is nothing is as it seems. Chicago should be a mystery, basically, is what they try to do.
Yeah, because
Which
Like that.
especially for this is your first kind of rodeo into the world of darkness, you really don't know what to expect.
I think the other thing is it might be for the Chicago players. It's like, yeah, you know your city, so in
Oh
this
yeah,
case,
because the Chicago had a very powerful LARPing community, and they really fell in love with World of Darkness during this time.
Yes, they did. So
So
one of the
this
things
is
that
them saying, "Oh yeah, like you know the locals and areas, but they might be different now."
yeah, the GM advice in this is actually quite good right at the start too, which is kind of one of the weird places to see it. But there you go. And then they have
Oh,
changes.
I
Finally,
love this charcoal. I love this. It's a rare example of
yeah,
charcoal art. Someone
oh
actually
yeah,
spent time to using a charcoal, just actually recreate the skyline.
why do I have a feeling that was actually
That's
point of view
actually
painted?
unique. It probably was, and it was probably by one of the actual developers, and it's actually really nice.
yes.
Oh,
So they
you
mentioned
can
the
actually
next,
see the love in this book, man.
yeah, they really went all out with this book, which is one of the things where it's like this is if you're talking about something to set the tone of an entire franchise, this book really does that.
I'm so glad we're looking at this and not fifth edition. Holy shit. Oh man.
Well, this is a classic book for a reason. Like you can, I think you can get this as print on demand now if you want a physical copy of that. There's also the second edition book, which is I would say is like the
It's cleaned up, but it's cleaned up. It kind of
it's more in the
remembers what
style
it
that you'd
was,
like.
but
It's the style that you'd be more familiar with from White Wolf. It's a 1993 book, so it's in
it's
that
where
kind
they've
of
hit their stride, so some things are very
yes,
different.
yes. For one thing, the meta plot is advanced, and Werewolf is now game line. Uh,
Because
and one of the
again,
things that I
I think at this period in time, I don't know if it's in this book, they might be, but if werewolves have been mentioned prior, they're this unknown horrendous threat that actively is out for vampiric blood, and they're the reason you don't leave the city. Because they're out there,
yeah,
and you don't
they
know
mentioned the
anything
gang. They'll
about
hang
them.
out with them a little bit. But the in any case, what I do like is they have this whole section of changes. Finally, as with any published gaming material, the storyteller is free to change any aspect of these characters. They are raw material for you to mold and fit into your own games. It is not merely your right; it is your duty.
Let's say with the Andre, like if Andrei Shtechkov, the Zamichi I mentioned, was in there, you could change up
Yeah,
their crazy, like instead of being a weird Russian futurist scientist, have him be like a weird, like, I don't know, Norman Bates style fucking killer, just to throw them off their track if they've read it. Like, oh, I know how they. Oh, but he doesn't. He instead actually kills you without torturing you.
yeah.
Wait,
I
what?
do love that that they basically go like, "This is your book. Do with it what you want to do," which is kind of a refreshing change from how a lot of people treat stuff like this. And it's right there from the authors.
Because again, they understand. They've played games. Remember, this is from the point of view of people who genuinely enjoy playing tabletopping games. They know
Yeah.
what they've dealt with metagaming before.
Yes. And
And
I
when they
love
did
some
the
of the
workout for these, they almost certainly had to change up the quests. Like when they did Ashes to Ashes, which came before this, they had to almost certainly have changed up events just to prevent them from
Ashes to
expecting.
Ashes is such a silly module in the long run. But in any case, they go immediately into the dam. There are more than 70 vampires living in Chicago, and yes, they do detail every single one, and they give them a picture.
That sounds
It's not
insane,
very
but
good art, but they do detail every single one and give you a picture of them.
which is something you don't usually see.
This is what we saw in Berlin too. Remember?
Well, no, we saw some of it in Berlin, but they didn't ever go to this level of depth.
Well, they do kind of in Berlin. There's more because they actually got artists that aren't. Well, you'll see the art
I
that we
saw
when we
Berlin
get to
by
it.
I remember Berlin by night
This is
partially.
kind of like early BattleTech art.
It
We'll
is.
see. We'll show that. We'll show that
It is
eventually.
90s. It is late 80s, early 90s art. Yes. In Chicago, there are only five. The dark powers that lie beyond the perimeter of the ancient forces at work within the city. Uh, Only five know of the Methuselahs. Only two know uh, Their names. They've been in war for over a millennium, and many of the other kindred are pawns in their jihad, including the Prince, the Prevention, and all the elders.
Because if
So
you're
it's like there's a
wondering, the
bunch of
prince at the time, Loden, was in the power struggle with Modius.
yeah. So like there's a bunch of other power. They go into that as well. Loden's laws, by the way, are very simple, and it's a very good detail for like an early game of like here's how laws of a prince can be laid out, which is like none of my kids say you shall kill and leave behind evidence of their feasting. If you're slaying, shall cause an investigation from the police, or worse, among the press. I shall track you down and extinguish you. Or if others speak for you, exile you. You must lick the wounds and dispose of all those you kill. I hold the fourth tradition as strong regard and do not take such violations of the masquerade lightly. Do
Which,
not charm travelers.
if you're wondering, I really like this setup too. This was not in
Yeah.
Berlin by Night, by the way, because
Well,
this
Merlin by Night had the two different princes, so there wasn't really a set of laws.
it doesn't matter because remember, not all storytellers would actually know this. Like if you're just starting out, this is actually really nice to know how you'd set up a Camarilla court.
Like the laws of that. I have but 5 laws along with masquerade,
Like
but
it
if you
gives
follow
you an
them strictly,
idea. It's real like not all storytellers, not all game masters, and it's perfectly acceptable if you ever want to run a game. Always start with an adventure module. Like I know Ashes to Ashes is goofy, but it works. Chicago by Night, use a supplement book. It is okay. You don't have to create whole cloth. Only do that if you feel confident.
yeah. And even then, it's useful to look at these books to mine for ideas because sometimes there's like, oh, there's a character I really like, and I'll use him. Or the bucket of fun.
Well, the bucket of fun was not was your own concept.
I know, but still, I kind of took it actually from Tokyo Ghoul. There was one scene that I caught like because I had my roommate watching it, and it was the scene with the bucket. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. Uh, and that's when I'm like, well, vampires work in a very similar way to them, so yeah, I can see them regenerating their fingers again and again and again.
I mean, hey, if you want another example, you can always call back to the mythos. Like you could have a crazy old man in a turtleneck to reference Oswald Mosley going to kill, I don't know, the mayor of Chicago, or
Yeah,
Barry, just
go
Barry.
for it. Just Barry.
That's episode
Oh,
15 for
Barry.
those who've never seen it.
It was pretty good. But yes, but basically, Loden says the press and the police are mine. Don't touch them. Don't go after tourists. Keep the sanctity of Elysium. Uh,
Elysium, basically, this is really reinforcing because if you cause shit there, that removes one of the very few places where you can actually have sanctuary. It's a very
yeah,
big deal in vampire
of
society.
course, his last law, the most important, is just don't fuck with me. Don't try to rebel. Don't try to go against me. I will find you and I will kill you. Mortal society is kind of simple, right?
Yeah. I mean, it can basically be summarized in government, business, unions, the high society, or the hobos and gangs.
Yeah. They go into like the Chicago machine a little bit, where it's like the Kindred control it now, and there was a time when there was a mayor that threw off the shackles, but it only lasted for a short time, and it's it's classic World of Darkness style of stuff. They also then, of course, give information about Chicago, and this is not exactly what I would call the most enthralling reading, where it's like here's stuff if you've never been to Chicago, and here's the temperature ranges at night.
Which
Vampires almost never travel alone is something that they make a point of. Where it's like Kindred have trouble traveling from city to city, and they do talk about that and how to get into Chicago through like the I-90, which is one of the main highways.
I
Air
like how
travel
they
is
actually
big, and
give you
it's
the climate too as an idea. I mean, it's not something you as a vampire would care too much about,
yeah,
but it's
and of
something to
course,
know.
and they're talking about how being shipped in a coffin would cost about $800 to get to Chicago. Um,
Mainly useful if you're
and a
Legacy
private
Michi who
jet with
needs
an
the dirt.
yeah, and a private jet with an uninquisitive crew would cost at least 4 grand, which again, 90s money. So it's but still, they mention this sort of stuff is pretty good.
Sea travel as well, because they do. The thing people
Yeah,
think,
there are it is a port.
Chicago's on one of the Great Lakes, which are comparable to some of the seas that are out there. They're just
The
freshwater.
Great yeah, the Great Lakes are very, very large. If you've never been to see them, it is worth visiting if you're ever in
Yeah.
like the area around
The
there.
best way to describe it is you legitimately look like you're staring out into the ocean, and it has its own weather system because of how
They
much
have their
water.
own very violent weather systems. Yes, it's
Chicago's
also
on one of the more placid lakes. The one of the
Michigan.
most
Yeah,
querulous ones, Erie, is really known for disappearing ships, along with Superior.
Superior is more known for that. Superior is the largest of the lakes.
Superior is notorious for disappearing ships.
Yeah, because the weather can be incredibly violent and swap over incredibly quickly there. Also, during the War of 1812, there were actual naval battles between ships that were constructed just to fight on the Great Lakes there,
Oh.
which
To
is
to
kind of
give you an
crazy.
idea, before our rapprochement with the United Kingdom and the Dominion of Canada, we actually had a Great Lakes fleet,
Yes, we did.
which
We
weren't
still
just
to
which were not just ships of the lines. We're talking full-sized frigates and very
yes,
small ships of the line, and then later on ironclads. And to give you an idea, we even had a micro aircraft carrier on the damn thing.
that aircraft carrier was
It was
actually
more for
a
training, but
training ship.
still.
It was a training ship. The ironclad was
Fact of the matter
also
is,
a
we had an
training ship.
aircraft carrier on the Great Lakes, baby.
Yes, there was still a naval station, I think, around Chicago, if I remember correctly, that is
Just
in
in the
fact like
rare event,
a
like
training.
Canada and the U.S. have a cold snap
And also
No,
because,
it's
well,
more
and for
like
port
training,
access.
it's more for training because it's one of the safest places to actually train someone in how do you navigate at sea. Well, you bring them out into the Great Lakes.
especially Superior, because that's kind of hard mode.
Yeah, and how do you deal with weather patterns and all this other stuff? Like it's a micro ocean.
Yeah, the only
It's
thing
kind
you
of
got the only thing you have to account for is because it's a freshwater system, you really do have to account for the water's more dense,
yes,
which is mainly for things like survival and flotation.
yeah. Now that said, they also go into like road taxis, air travel, rail, and then they have
Rail,
another
yeah,
fantastic one of
Chicago.
those.
So here's the thing. One of the
Chicago is has like a huge rail network in it. The L
Yeah.
track or the
Well,
It's
yeah, because
just the
it's
L.
the network of freight, and also it has its own internal city system. It did historically. It mostly got torn up mainly because in the U.S. we never went as hard into trains just because of distances.
which
Distances
is stupid
versus
because
population.
trains are the most efficient way to haul cargo long distances over land.
Yeah,
We
but
have
cargo ain't
trucks.
necessarily bloody people, and getting to and from your place of work isn't necessarily ideal in the form of a railway. Sometimes vehicles are more effective in that sort of shit. You're talking like massive population movements. I'm talking like local transportation. I can like the type of long form networks like you'd see in the United Kingdom, for example. You probably wouldn't ever see. What you'd probably see are three large networks based on the three very large metropolitan areas, because we kind of have effectively megacities. That's where rail works best traditionally in high density situations like that. At least
Yeah,
the light rail, early auto transportation sort of thing. Like I'm not denigrating. I'm just pointing out like in those circumstances, yes, it's king, but like there is a benefit in say the Midwest, like in little, I don't know, Peoria, or I don't know,
yeah.
Athabasca or Elgin.
I get what you're saying, but like let's try to keep moving here because this
I
is a
know.
long book. This is almost 200 pages.
I'm aware. I just
Uh,
want to. We were already done chapter one though, and it's less than an hour. I think we're doing pretty good.
Hmm.
but yes,
Now
early
into
settlers.
the
They talk about
history.
the history is the history for the World of Darkness is very basic, which is that the U.S. Army comes in. There's a few things here. Got Chief Blackhawk, all this other stuff. In any case, there's also a vampire there called
Millennius.
Menelaus,
Menele.
or but he calls himself Menela now. There's also Helena, another ancient vampire who's arrived with him. They have some fighting around, whatever else. Uh, Helena really fucked up, got really fucked up by
I mean,
Uh,
Menele headbutted her until her head became a puddle.
yeah, I think she survived.
She did.
Yeah, she went
She,
into
she
torpor.
no, she did. She appears in a few very plot relevant books. I think she might even appear in Chaos Factor. I think.
Yeah. In any case, there is a the first prince was Prince Maxwell, who was here there until 1871, because he's trying to keep the peace in the city because like there's so many people coming in here as the population grew, and Prince Maxwell was in fact a black man, which is kind of an interesting thing where they're going like, yeah, because it's a point here of like vampires legitimately, if you hang on to moral prejudices for too long, you're just going to get killed. Because you can't just look at someone and say, oh, they're lesser than me
Well,
because
there's
because
also
yeah.
the matter that you're an undead monster now.
Well,
Like
there's all
you're
yeah.
you have
oh
transcended the mortal
Well, it's more
worries.
because underestimating any of your rivals will get you killed as a vampire.
Oh yeah.
because yes, you may mock a woman as inferior, but turns out she's a fifth generation vampire, and you're 12th.
Yeah, she can tear your fucking arm off and
How
beat you
many
to death with it.
megacities does America have? Well, there's the New York to Philadelphia, Washington D.C. kind of interconnected metro state, I'd like to call it, with arms that reach up to
Basically
Boston.
the northeastern metro area is basically the way you call it. Like that's what I call it.
There's the Chicago
There's the
region.
Chicago metro area. There's the
There's
Seattle
South
metro area.
California that stretches from
Uh,
Tijuana and Mexico all the way up to I'd say San Francisco.
yeah,
Then
like
there's
again the
L.A.
SoCal,
And there's
which
a
is part of the
smaller one that's
SoCal.
developing in the Seattle region, although it's not gotten as developed yet.
There's
There is
Seattle. There's
no,
also of
there's a
course
small
Dallas Fort
fourth one.
Worth.
Yeah, that's another one.
There's Dallas Fort Worth as well. That's a pretty large network. You've also got the Louisiana, kind of like
Yeah, Louisiana's been
New
kind of
Orleans,
developing along with some of the other Gulf Shore
uh,
cities.
Louisiana area, and of course then there's the Miami, Orlando kind of stretch along the
Miami and
south
Orlando
corridor.
have almost linked at this point. Yes. So there's enough that yes, you can legitimately do well. Anyway, yeah, Maxwell, very much not what you'd expect if you're immortal, but as a vampire, pretty much standard.
Pretty standard actually. He was Bruja. Was actually a pretty decent Bruja when he was keeping he was trying to keep the city in New Carthage, but that didn't really quite work out.
because
Flames, but
yeah,
by the way, it was not the cow that burnt down Chicago in the Great Fire of 1871. It was a mad Malkavian.
Hmm.
I mean, do we know if it was
Amazingly, only a
actually Miss
few,
O'Leary?
No, it was
it,
just a random Malkavian who thought he was a cow.
possibly. But in any
But no,
case,
in case fun thing, Maxwell and the boys and girls they got yeeted by that. But when Chicago really exploded in population because of the effects of the Civil War and also just the opening of the West, as more people
yeah,
flooded that way, vampires didn't really grow too much. What really changes it is kind of falls into anarchy.
yep. The fire guts the city, so there's suddenly an opening, and well, Loden comes in, tears off.
Basically, rips apart what few rivals there were and ensconces himself as
Yeah,
the second prince.
yeah. Maxwell escapes after killing a bunch of Toreadors and Ventry that were attacking him, and it was a one. It was 1v like 9, and he still survived. He lost an arm, but he survived.
What was his generation?
Pretty
I
high.
don't know. I pretty high probably.
Doesn't
Uh,
matter though.
I mean, his sire
We'll see him, I
was
think.
an ancient Spanish Bruja, so I'm assuming he's probably like fourth or fifth gen.
He's
Uh,
I mean he's possibly as low as fifth
like his
gen.
his sire. I'm assuming his sire was fourth or fifth gen.
I'd say he's sixth or seventh gen personally.
If he's seventh gen, that's still pretty impressive.
That's what I
Like,
mean, sixth or seventh, most likely sixth.
yeah. In any case, the Loden kind of gets into power. Loden is then there's of course the Modius, and I can't help but think of it is I, Dr. Morbius,
So
coming to
anyway,
him from the
Modius
Forbidden
moded
Zone.
all over Chicago.
Yeah, and also Morbus, yeah. Morbius, because why the fuck not? It's Morbin time.
Oh, some also details from a person who lives on the Great Lake. Yeah, they very much feel like the ocean. I only got to see. Actually, no, I did get to see one of them. I got to see Lake Erie. That was the smallest of them, but yeah, there's a certain size about it that you just know.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not infinite, but it feels like it.
Also, so it turns out that I believe Modius started the Haymarket riot.
Yes, he
Yes,
did.
he did. They link the Vampires of Chicago deeply into the history, which is kind of what they do a lot in first edition and as the game is starting out. Which again, at
Well,
the time, this is
yeah.
pretty freaking novel.
It's
Like
novel,
let's
it's
not think.
new, it feels interesting, and it's not ridiculous because we're talking on a local level.
And I'd be honest, it also is not like what it does in modern, where it gets offensive. It's more like the politics of the vampires intersect with the politics of
Of the local
mortals.
governing region.
We're not having a vampire create the rise of the Nazi Party.
Well, no, no,
It's
you
not like
forgot
that.
that he also was responsible for the sudden rise of Prussia as well.
Oh yeah, that too.
He was responsible for the rise of Prussia, the destruction of Weimar, the rise of Nazi Germany, and also the rebirth of West Germany. Keep that in mind. That's compared to this, it's very much a local feeling scenario. Yes, it relates to historical events, but it's events that are more condensed to the city, which, if you're going to do that sort of shit, this is how I think you should go.
Yeah,
What really, and this is why, and you can definitely tell, this is why the fifth generation LARPers often say they're referencing first generation, because it has a very strong and different feeling from later gens. There's a reason why instead of Hunter the Reckoning, they did Hunter's Hunted, which was both different and much better than what they actually did.
yeah, and but yeah, they go into like the talk about so what was going on inside of the city. Like there's the Pullman strike. There's like all this other stuff. They talk about the politics inside of the city, and again, there this is all classic stuff. I seriously do recommend you go and buy this book.
Like, and it also gives you an idea on how power hungry Loden is, because his whole thing is buying the unions. Like, these are all things.
Yes, he not only
Basically,
buys all the unions,
anarchs
but he
began
also
using them, but like he bought them.
he also uses his right as prince to only be the only one that can create children. Like that is one of Loden's rules, and he uses that to create a bunch of children that he can control to help manage the city and control things, which is actually a very again a very interesting way of having a prince that works like this. Like it's a mob family inside of the there. And speaking of
Reminder
which,
that Heinrich did the same fucking thing. Huh, I wonder what they were inspired by when they wrote Berlin by Night.
yeah,
Hmm. Hmm.
speaking of which,
Kachimar Praxis.
well, they do that. Uh, they talk about like the first Elysiums of like the city where it's like Loden is creating this area of all this and
And
Loden.
I believe the Elysium is actually the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
Yes, it is.
It is. And they actually reference that this is based on an old Toreador tradition,
Yes, they do. They
which is a
mentioned it
nice little
like
cultural nod that most books would forget about.
yeah, the Toreador where they go into this in their clan book of how like they are very important when it comes to the customs and traditions of vampires in general, especially with stuff like Elysium or whatever else.
Yeah, so
Because
it's
they're
really nice that, like, this, because they assume you don't know. I love that because it's actually reaching out to people. That's a big problem that I think is in the RPG industry nowadays. They just assume that you know it because you've consumed product. Now consume next product,
but yes.
which I think is actually
Uh,
doing more damage.
by the way, speaking of this gathering, so Loden moves to make Capone his newest
Oh,
lieutenant.
Capone is an interesting fellow, and he's even better here.
So Loden refused to forget the challenge. So he basically, in the end, Loden gave Ballard and Capone free reign to cripple the Indiana city's economy of Gary, Indiana, of course. So Modius got completely fucked up by that. So the collapse of Gary, Indiana. Capone, of course, used his racket to do all this, and the Ventru are responsible for Gary being a shithole.
Well, yeah, basically Gary, Indiana is one of the first cities in the what was called the Steel Belt to rust out. Gary's economic decline started a lot earlier than most cities in the region.
It's also if you've never heard of the Music Man, it's also the subject of a song. And that Gary, Indiana, I think is the actual name of the song, and it's just such a it's a classic song. Anyway, they
I
also
love
then
how
talk
all
about
the
like
Venture of Chicago collectively decided to cuck Gary to death.
yes, they did. They all got together because they're all related to Loden, and he basically went, "All right, fuck Gary, fuck
Lock
Gary,
it in the
Indiana.
cuck shed.
Well,
We're
hold on,
locking
wait.
Gary, Indiana, in
Wouldn't
the cuck shed."
wouldn't it mean they're bloodbound?
They are.
They are.
That's part of the reason
Loden
why
wants
he's
to
able to
keep
keep his
power.
power.
And that's why he hates. That's why he hates Modius so much, because he's a Toreador, not tied to him. He's a little more suspicious of newbies because of the lack of familial bond he can use to essentially squeeze them into
Oh, by the way,
loyalty.
they're also behind the Democratic Party convention riot. Loden, because
They
he
kick
he
out.
used them to get rid of the anarchs. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the largest U.S. city under cameral control at this point in the setting, because LA is at this point independent. Because you've got basically the free city of LA, like the anarch state of California, and
Which they
New York
mention quite a
is
bit in
Sabbat
Bloodlines if you've
controlled.
not seen it.
Yeah, and New York is Sabbat controlled. So it is the largest city in America controlled by the Camarilla. In any case, you get kind of
And
Loden.
during the 60s, there were serious, and 50s, the anarch agitation was getting pretty strong, which they actually tie to the rise of the sewer socialist movement in the Midwest. Sewer
They
socialists,
also,
which
of course,
included
pilot.
actually electing communists, which happened in Detroit a couple of times.
It also happened in Michigan, not in Michigan, in Milwaukee, which was one of the best mayors they ever had. Was a guy that literally the sewer
Part of the
socialist because he
Socialist Party
campaigned
USA.
on fixing the sewers.
That's where it got the name from. It was
Yeah,
also a derogative term by harder leftists because of the fact of the matter that they're willing to corrupt and muddy the actual view of socialism to get elected. It was an insult in that regard too. But no, as a whole, most of them were actually pretty damn good at their jobs. The only
but yes,
exception was Detroit, but Detroit had other factors besides them.
Like
yeah.
being
And
Detroit.
in any case, well, yeah, Detroit
Like
is.
having the car factories go. You actually, if you're curious, the entertainment industry delusion and collapse. If you actually look at how they're acting, very similar
It's
to the
like the
car
car
companies.
companies in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, where the market forces are changing and they're refusing to look at that.
Particularly Disney. Disney has the same kind of crackhead delusional energy as Ford in the
Oh
70s.
boy, that makes me happy.
Yeah. And in any case, they talk about how Loden, of course,
The Night of Rage.
the Night of Rage, does another political purge.
Hey, look,
Uh,
the art here, doesn't that feel like actually I that art looks like you'd see from Darkest Dungeon.
it does, doesn't it?
Like a modern day Darkest Dungeon.
No, this is decades before. Like this is
Yeah.
No, no, I'm saying it like if there was a modern version of Darkest Dungeon with
which
I don't
if
know,
you're
there
wondering, Darkest Dungeon and this art in particular is inspired by the very heavy, I think it's called chiaroscuro, the difference between light and dark, that Mike Mignola of Hellboy fame does.
Yes.
That's where that
But
specific kind of dark shadowing comes from, that very heavy emphasis on it.
yes, the Anarchs are crushed by Loden using the Democratic Convention as cover.
Richard C. Daly, destroyer of the Anarch cause.
but
Yes.
does that
So
mean Mayor Daley was a ghoul?
possibly.
He might have been a ghoul. What's more likely is some of his campaign staffers were ghouls, and let's be fair, Loden was probably one of his biggest and most reliable financial backers for this machine.
In any case, they managed to take out a lot of like this, but the Anarch movement, of course, was on the rise in the '60s, and they fought all over and all that. Anarchs
And
were,
basically because of what he did, yeah, he gutted them pretty bad.
and
But
also outlawed siring.
before they went out though, they hit hard, including
Oh yeah, they
storming
did.
Elysium.
They did.
Oh,
That's part of the reason why they went and
Several actually higher ups in the Camarilla were forced into torpor for a few years. One of them almost fucking died.
yep.
They did not go quietly into the night.
But probably Loden would have let them off a little bit better if
No, he
they
wouldn't.
hadn't.
No, he
They
wouldn't.
wouldn't. Now, this is one of my favorite little bits in this is the the Lincoln Zoo mystery.
Ah, here we go. Yep, animal thefts, which actually happened in real life, by the way.
Yes, it did. There was Rosa Hernandez, a gangrel anarch, descended on the thieves and killed them in an orgy of bloodletting. In any case, the police believe that somehow the thieves fell prey to their stolen goods. The theory held a little more water than Rosa's belief. For one thing, the animals were also found dead. Uh, I think that some of this is made up details, but
Oh, definitely. It
uh,
is. This is.
I do love I do love the thing. The bizarre bone marrow killings ended about a week later, and no one ever determined the cause. Of course, Kindred gossip has provided several possible explanations, from extraterrestrials visiting to a visiting Methuselah with a new thirst.
Because the vampires can eat animals, they just don't taste particularly good.
Well, the lower generation can survive on rats and things like that if you're not a Ventru.
They taste
I wouldn't
disgusting,
want to
but
do it.
it's
Yeah.
survivable.
And of course, the Anarchs came back after a while, then began the Council Wars, like the Clone Wars, except a decade early.
So here's
Uh,
the thing: Lawden, he's spent many decades being careful, but this is after he kind of scrubbed the slate clean, and he's been
so of
ruling
course he
easily
got.
for a couple of decades.
So he's looking like at Mel Davis, and he's like, "Yeah, who gives a shit? It's another punk. It's easy enough to deal with." Uh, Loden had finally gotten basically. Loden was making a bunch of neonates to help him rule parts of mortal society, uh, to also limit the ones that he's already created. Then of course we have there's a lot of political stuff going on in the vampire world with like the Primogen and the Prince are at odds at some areas. There's a bunch of kindred attacking each other. Maldavis, the Anarch, is challenging Loden for all this. Then Loden finally just goes like Rog smash.
Operation Incubator, he just hits it really hard.
Yeah, he just goes and kind of just purges them. Uh, Prince almost killed Mel Davis herself, and but she survived. But at the same time, he's like, okay. Also, then we have the mention of the Succubus Club. They'll talk about that later.
Yep.
It's one of the things that
Also,
was
this
created
is
in
one
here.
of the key things that caused his grip on the city to weaken pretty heavily.
Yes, was this council war? Yeah,
Because he
uh,
basically had to gut a lot of support, had to burn a lot of mortal contacts, and it also made him a bit more vulnerable in Vampire because previously it was just Modius that's been his kind of big rival. Now he kind of has a third problem.
yeah. Now we also have the fact is that while you think that Loden is the one that's actually doing it, well, no, Loden is also the puppet of Helena.
Who has been
Just
both of them are
indirectly.
still in the city, yes.
Yes, because they're still in the city, and Menelae is controlling the city's anarchs right now. Thus far, most of the battles revolve around each Methuselah's attempts to kill off the other's allies, and many kindred have perished as a consequence. You
So
know,
yeah,
Helena.
Loden thinks he's doing it on his own. No, not really.
No, she's been influencing him from under. I want to know this. She's been influencing him while in torpor. She's not even blood related to the guy, and she's still doing it.
Well, no, she's around. She lives quietly in the Succubus Club,
Now she does.
masquerading as Cordia. Yep.
She's only woken up very recently, like very recently.
This feels like the archetypical vampire setting where you have
Well,
It
again.
is.
it's the first one they
That's because
hammered
it
through.
is. Yeah, it is. It is the
Like,
archetypical because
to
this is the
give you an
one where
idea,
they first made it and then they based everything else off of it because it was very good.
yeah, it was a good kind of like Byzantine political thriller sort of thing, where you
Yeah,
figure out, no, this guy, like, for all of his power, he's still a puppet, and it's an actual still a war. It's a war that's been around even longer than when he came to the city, back when it was still just a trading post for the French.
yeah. We're
Like,
only 20 pages in, by the way.
yeah, we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. But yes, we get the. By the
You
way,
really want to cover
Loden.
Milwaukee by Night, don't you?
I don't actually want to cover Malky by Night tonight, but I kind of want to get through as much of the book as possible.
Yeah, this book is really worth it. That's why we're trying to.
Yeah, that's why it's worth it. Like I'm like I
I
want to show you more of
heartily
it.
recommend go try to get a physical copy and a reprint of this book, particular edition book, or you can get it via the RPG RPG.net, not RPG.net, RPG drive-through link that I always put
Drive
in
through
these
RPG.
streams.
Yeah.
Drive-through RPG that
Uh,
I put in there.
and of course there's some fantastic art like this Road Warrior guy on a bike. Like look at
Oh,
this.
and they have a little timeline here. Here's the Road Warrior, very much classic.
Yeah.
This is the style they eventually leaned more into in second edition.
Yes.
Like the previous kind of lurch looking fellow, that's stuff you'd see in first edition usually.
And you also see it in second and
Just
somewhat
not as
revised.
much.
It really depended on the artist and who they had available and things like that.
Yeah, but this kind of
But
became the face as time went on. Not
yeah,
this guy, but just the style.
yeah, where it's like
Along with just
a
taking
sort of
photos of
semi-traced
themselves.
bike, and yeah, as we learned to love in the Valkenburg Foundation, with
Oh, don't,
Silvercado being thrown into a table. Yeah,
oh, don't worry, don't worry. Fifth edition did the same thing, but very shit, sadly.
No one got thrown to a
it
table.
didn't have the classic charm
Well,
of like
that's
yeah.
because they weren't willing to like hurt themselves akin to Jackass.
Well, it wasn't that they were hurting themselves. It's that they photoshopped, they like photo imposed
They
it
were
over
willing
like
to
people
look
getting thrown in the table.
embarrassing though. Like they
Yeah,
were
they were
like
willing to look
they
like
were in on the
ridiculous. Yeah,
joke and kind of chuckling like, yeah, look, I'm Satyrblood, the powerful like gangrel warlord getting my ass thrown no, getting a powerful wolf blood, getting my ass thrown through a fucking fake window
yeah,
by like one of the other writers.
yeah. But
Who looks like a
yes,
stick,
they have
and they're
a
both kind of doing like their best war face, but you can tell they're both inside cracking up.
yeah. But they're looking at Chicago here. They're kind of looking at like, well, it's actually not too different. But of course, they're talking about how it's like
Architecture wise,
the
it's a bit different.
but now it's like, but the shadows between the buildings are somehow deeper. Few pedestrians dare walk the streets after dark, even in the good parts of town.
Think Gotham think
Gotham City,
Gotham during the
basically Gotham
1940s.
City. It's Gotham City, yeah.
Gotham City when Batman before the massive crossover with the other Justice League became a thing.
Yeah, and of course they're talking about the suburbs. They talk about like the neighborhoods in Chicago, and they give a detail. They have a nice little map of like, here's
Yeah.
the general area of Chicago. Which again, this is a time before the internet is really a big thing. So
Oh, and they're
maps
also
like
called
this
the
were actually
Outlands, by the way.
incredibly helpful.
The
Yeah,
suburbs are called Outlands, but the Gentiles often prefer the nice parts of town. The
yeah,
rougher sorts, which include your Brujas, your less refined Brujas, and like your Nos and others, they prefer, well, Chiraq.
The South Side.
Not just the South Side. There's other areas besides South of Chicago.
Yeah, but
South Chicago is the worst area of it, and even
Yeah.
then, it's
it
only some neighborhoods in South Chicago.
So they covered downtown Chicago, which is
they
your
probably hang out
Magnificent
in
Mile.
Inglewood.
And here's a nice little map that shows the O'Hare Airport, all the road structures, some of the major
Yeah, and they
neighborhoods.
have a detail of the Loop, which is that downtown area of Chicago.
Oh, look,
Uh,
here's another charcoal painting.
Which it's called that because the L loops around the
yeah,
area.
and
And
it's right by the
uh,
Chicago River as well.
yeah. And
They
Loden apparently governs at the Prudential Building,
Yes, they
which is
basically say
actually
that he is in a big building. He's in the Prudential Building out here on the 34th floor.
Yep,
He
which
owns that floor.
which you know what I actually I do like that they give the actual address of the place.
Yeah, and of course they say that there are cable cars there instead of the actual bus system, which I find is really funny. Like,
yep. They brought
because
one of the changes in the World of Darkness is the trolley system, which many areas, including actually some surprisingly small towns that you wouldn't think would have a trolley system, had a trolley system. In the World of
yeah,
Darkness, these are still running.
which is it's kind of charming in a ridiculous way because it's like I'm imagining a werewolf on a trolley and it's just making me giggle for whatever reason.
No, like they're going to the trolley to go to like the cartoonish like coal power plant that like
Yeah,
instead of like our timeline where they were where they actually had to follow environmental regulations. No, it's like belching pure poison. You see like coal miners, you see like the actual workers dying of black lung, and then one of them expires. You just chuck it into the fucking furnace so it powers the steam boiler.
Yeah, but they do actually talk a little bit. I think this is the first mention of lycanthropes is on the page after the
Well, yeah, they
picture of the
also
leaf where they're
have
talking about
shopping for those vampires in the mood. Also, again, I love the charcoal painting. Very,
the charcoal painting is
it's
very good.
rough,
Yes,
but you can really tell the
and they
passion.
talk about a bunch of bookstores that they probably went to and things like that, where they're talking about
He,
like
and here's a
here's
closer map for you, the
locations and
Canite. Shows you the
yep,
important areas. Music scene
and
because it's
Which
punk.
would
Punks need music to jive and fight the man with.
again something
yes, there's also several Elysium buildings as well.
something to explain with that uh,
Also, this bit of
loop map. You can see that well, the design of it is very much modern. Everything's at a grid formation.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
Again, this isn't. If you're a European viewer, if you ever wonder like why, it's because because our cities were new. When we went through urban renewal, it became very easy for us to do that.
yeah, we built in grids.
Which also gave travel via car a bit of an advantage because you don't have to perfectly memorize the nightmare road system like in Paris or London. They're far
Because
newer cities.
those are naturally, yeah, because those were naturally occurring railway roads that were built around into the actual structure of the city. No, this is like fuck it, we're burning this down and we're rebuilding the entire city in a fucking grid square
Wait, there were
because there is no
Bruja that
city.
weren't just angry teens.
Yeah,
Yeah, Darkside. Like I know they usually bitch about McCarthage, but this is before the writers forgot that the Bruja had a fallen nobility to them. That like
well,
the slow.
that was the we remember Carthage stuff is the fallen nobility though. Like to be honest,
But
like
then there's the ones that rather than bitch about it, actually try to I guess, put on airs and continue to preach that shit.
yeah,
Like people forget that Bruja can easily be very charismatic, high society nobles. They're just very passionate. It'd be like your eccentric millionaire. Like you can
by the
play them
way,
that way. It's a perfectly viable. It's a very perfectly viable Bruja. You don't have to make them the skinhead punk that just hits you really hard with their fist.
yeah,
Then they bring up the Art Institute of
You can
Chicago,
play them. You can
yeah, they
play
do.
them like Don Quixote, actually.
Yeah,
Although that fits the
they bring up the
Malkavians
art.
better.
Yeah, they bring up the Art Institute of Chicago. They do have one of the things they do talk about is that yes, like lycanthropes will attack you if you're traveling from city to city occasionally. Like
Oh yeah,
they
like
do
they
mention that it's like a one line thing, but they do mention that. They talk about like other various locations in the city along with the nightlife.
financial distance. They actually go into what is it? You might get attacked by lycanthropes. Amtrak trains are very good for plausible deniability for like coffins or resting places. So
Yeah,
if you do not have your own little turf, because some vampires don't, Amtrak is a pretty good way, especially since people ain't gonna question the weirdo like sleeping on the train in the day.
yeah.
One of the funniest jokes, actually. I know it's a bit off topic, but it's fine. If you ever want to know what the English bus experience is like, go on Amtrak. Like the
Yeah,
exact same energy, vice versa.
yeah. There's more of the art that you really like, by the way.
Yeah, that's just because that charcoal, like
is that a Picasso?
No, it's just
that's an
it's the
abstract
charcoal.
statue.
Yeah, but I thought
Yeah.
I
But
thought
then there's
Picasso
like
made it.
charcoal making the charcoal art you really like. There's a good amount of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff like they talk about like the nightlife.
Yep,
There's also, of
Magnificent
course,
Mile near
a
North Side, shopping and food.
Which
by the way,
don't can't
uh,
vampires not eat?
No, they
they
can.
can
They can
eat.
spend blood.
They just can't taste it oftentimes.
To
They
them
can.
it
It also makes them
tastes like
ill.
ash.
And I'm
It also
surprised they
makes
do
them
not.
violently ill. There's actually a
They do
merit
not.
though for can eat food and actually die and like you don't get any nutrition out of it, but you don't get violently ill when you eat it.
And it
They
gives
did
you
not.
like an echo of the taste.
They did not bring up the Chicago dog or deep dish pizza.
This is supposed to
Disappointment.
be the refined area of town, my man.
That is refined cuisine.
The Chicago dog is the devil. Give me Coney Island dog every day of the week.
But yes, they
I
one of the things
fucking
that they
hate those
mentioned here.
super thick spears of pickles they put on that shit and the gajillion other toppings they put on it.
All right,
It's
all right.
delicious.
No.
Speaking of things that pop up here, if you pay attention, they talk about the fact that there are in fact wizards in
Oh,
Chicago. They mention the Orthodox Temple of Akhenaten. and the Phantom.
It's not in art. It's not in Water Tower. Is it further south in miscellaneous?
It's on the second page right after that. Like the
Oh, look at this little bit of art. That's cute.
yeah, it's right after that piece of art, basically.
Oh,
Then they
Yeah,
have
the
like
water
that
tower.
Acolytes of
nightlife.
the Temple of just before the Nightlife. It's
Oh,
just that
worshippers at
section
the
just
Phantom.
above it.
There we go.
Worshippers at the Temple of Akhenaten dedicate themselves to the worship of Egyptian deities, including Thoth. The common member is usually a normal-looking man or woman, the same as you might see in a business district or whatever else. However, there's rumors that the masters of the hierarchy are true masters of Egyptian magic with a K because it's cool. Worshippers of the Phantom follow pagan theology, and of course, this sometimes attracts gangrels. There's claims that it has connections with
You might
lycanthropes,
want
and
to
it's never been
rebalance your
proven.
microphone, by the way. It's a little bit
Oh, sorry.
tinny. It's a little tinny.
Also, I believe the Phantom that actually ends up becoming the werewolves.
There's already rumors that it's connected to it here. If you
Ah,
take a look.
Yeah, they play around with it, but this is really before they've written anything for werewolves or mage.
Yes, this is again, but it gives you an idea of what they were trying to build
There's a
into
little
even
more
this
in the
early.
world than just, and that's another thing. It really plays into Chicago not being what it seems, because you think it's purely vampires, and then they mention, wait, lycanthropes are a thing that you have to worry about.
And
Wait,
you're like, wait a minute, the fucking wizards? Wait, what?
there's
What?
dudes that like
oh,
practice actual fucking magic. What?
oh, don't forget
Yeah,
also extraterrestrials were mentioned.
Not. Oh, by the way,
That
they did,
I
but
should.
that
They
could
never
be
did
aliens
that.
or the Fae.
No, they didn't even think of Faye at this point. That's like a second
I
event.
know, but definitely
yeah,
could add that.
But
they
I
also, of
will
course,
say, to continue the culinary debate of Chicago, the deep dish pizza is actually really damn good.
Thank you.
yeah.
I just think the New York version's better.
Fuck you.
But yes,
You're
they
gonna hate
have.
me more because I think the Detroit style is also better.
Oh wow.
No,
Anyway,
not deep dish.
moving on to something not completely, uh,
Hey, I like all pizzas
controversial.
except I like all pizzas except pizza portuguesa because that shit's like Instagram memes. That thing's atrocious. California
So
pizza is also pretty damn bad.
moving on. There's a
The
Brujah who
nightlife.
there's the nightlife. It exists. um,
There's
sex,
no
drugs,
East
rock and roll,
Side
all that.
because of Lake Michigan.
Yeah, it's just
Also,
the stuff on
because
the
of
border.
Loden's Law, you can't really fuck with tourists. So,
Yeah, so
Oh,
usually Kindred don't go there very often.
well, there's
they also
also a
bring up
danger there.
There's some that there's rumors that there is a Methuselah that breaks into the aquarium to feed on fish there though sometimes,
Yeah.
uh,
but
which
one
I
thing
find
they
funny.
also do like that they bring up Cabrini Green. They bring up the comedy clubs like Second City.
Yeah, they do.
You get a good picture of the nightlife.
They also have the University of Chicago mentioned there. They also
Oh
have the
yeah,
Well, they also have the Soldier Field, Homa de Bears.
Da
and
Bears.
the museums.
Hmm.
Uh,
Again, I just want to
Steel
Southside.
mention this
Museum.
one character because I love this little detail. Because of its critical importance to mortal history, this has drawn the interest of several vampires, University of Chicago, including the Athenian Bruja Critias, who visits occasionally to discuss theory with old friends and their proteges. Not knowing his name, the university people call him the Doctor after an obscure British television program, which has achieved cult status in some universities. Since he never ages, Critias must disappear for 10 years or so every 30 to avoid suspicion. Nevertheless, he has become the subject of some rather bizarre rumors. He merely dabbles in various fields of science. His tendency to spout off his wilder theories recently led to the widely spread belief in the scientific community of a feasible milk bottle fission generator.
I think that's a nod to Cold Fusion.
Yes, there's also some mention of like, oh, there's some monsters in the sewers and things like that. It's classic. Then we get the
But yeah, this is before because to give you an idea, interest in the Doctor in the U.S. was basically nil. Just for
yeah,
culture for cultural comparison, for those wondering, since I looked into this, I've been a fan of reading alternate history, and a lot of the more popular 20th century ones is changes in pop culture. Yeah, the Doctor. I think what was it? A couple of the versions of the Doctor were picked up by local television, and that was about it. So
And
yes,
you either had to be really tied to the Anglosphere in general, like you picked it up maybe in Canada, or you picked it up in the UK, especially, like just because you interact and you just find fondness there.
and
Um,
wasn't the movie kind of for? I guess American audiences.
It was a last gasp because remember this is when the BBC was a comptroller tried to crush it, which wasn't helped because the writers at the time in the 80s actually fucking hated the show they worked on. Unironically, you're seeing this now in modern entertainment. The difference is back in the day, you had that point of view. Sometimes people would actually go, "Oh, you don't want to work on it. Okay, I'm murdering it all. No survivors, including your career for now." If you hate your work, you
Anyway,
basically might get it canceled.
Then,
the
well,
By
so
the way,
next thing to
that
bring up is
comptroller is the
yeah.
only one that Queen Elizabeth II did not knight because she was a very big secret fan of Doctor Who.
Oh, wait, really?
Yes, he is the only
Oh,
comptroller she did not knight, and it's often suspected it's because he canceled the Doctor.
That's really funny. What do you think? Okay, random question. Which doctor do you think was Queen Elizabeth II's favorite doctor?
I mean, I feel like it would just be the first one, just
No,
doing she would have been around
my
before that.
I mean that'd be the one she grew up with, but I actually think she might be a Pertwee fan. It's either him or Jelly Baby's boy.
My bet is the second doctor.
Possibly.
because I think that she probably found out about it because during the early runs, well, it was the first Doctor, but she never really got into it, and then she got into it during the second one
Because
because there was nothing else on
because
TV.
Harknell was more educational because the first Doctor's arc was
Um,
Yeah,
what if it turns out she has all the recordings of all the episodes?
I would not be
I
surprised
wouldn't be
if there's just
surprised
some
if
room in Buckingham Palace that is just wall to wall Doctor Who merchandise that the British royal family is desperately hiding from all of us because they can't let the fact that the Queen wrote like Doctor Who slash fic get out onto the internet.
she wrote Doctor and Master fan fiction in the same vein as the early Star Trek fan fiction.
Oh
Exactly.
no.
But eventually we're gonna find out like 5
We're
different
gonna find
episodes. They're
out.
not perfect rips because they're recorded on another device, but like 5 episodes that were thought lost in the BBC fires. They're not in high quality, but they're like a reproduction.
And they're just in Buckingham Palace, and they're
Like
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 the
5
lit
more
the lit
episodes of The Lost have been found.
the Lich Queen Elizabeth II, who's currently like achieved Eldritch Abomination territory in order to preserve the last tapes of Doctor Who. She's not dead. She's a lich now. Yeah. Anyway,
Hey, Bridgeport
speaking
in
of lich,
Chinatown.
yeah, Bridgeport
Uh,
and Chinatown. So they mentioned that there was, which is a crossover with more British stuff, is that MI6 agents came to Bridgetown and got killed by fucking vampires.
because they were searching
Yeah,
for the IRA.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
because Hyde Park and Bridgeport were originally very Irish.
Yes. Then we had, of course, Chinatown. They then, of course, talk like about this, where there are Chinese warlocks that live in the sewers of Chinatown,
Which is a very
which
strong nod to Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, that's
it is.
yeah.
They're
And
basically suggesting you follow that if you decide to go on that adventure ride.
it is under it is under the protection of a vampire known as Chukluk or
Did they
Chukluk.
say he's a vampire?
Yeah, he is.
Well, I'm guessing because it says he has ruthlessly killed canine intruders. So I'm assuming he's their kind of vampire.
He could be a
This is
wizard.
before the Kuei Jin. So no, in this he's just a straight up vampire, my man.
He's like a sort of kind of vampire, I think. I'd have to look through this again. It's like I can't remember off the top of my head. The Creuss is famous, by the way, in the West Side as well for a practical joke that has led to the oddities such as University Hall, the behavioral sciences and sciences engineering building, and all that sort of other stuff of the University of Illinois Chicago.
Oh, they also mentioned that on the west side is where you can find the old headquarters of the Black Panthers,
Oh.
Yes, they also have
which
coffin
a
makers
lot of
and
licks, especially
formalware.
in the Anarchs, were tied to them.
I love that they mentioned like the audit orders that the coffin maker receives that he doesn't question and things like that. Where it's like there's a lot of little details in this book
Yep, Spangler
about like the people
Manufacturing,
around you.
which actually is another nod to Ghostbusters because they're
Yes, it
assuming he's
is.
like Egon,
Yes, it
very
is.
understated.
There's a lot of little references in
I
this.
manufacture coffins. I don't care where they're used or why they're used.
There's also, of course, the mention of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and the biography at the biography theater,
Which, yeah, of course.
of course. And they also mentioned, of course, as the place where John Dillinger was gunned down by federal agents.
Yep.
Also
That's the
bring
other
up
thing. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of local history and research that they did. And this is actually, if you're wondering, during this section of Berlin by Night, this is where this is where the book was at its strongest, and you can see why, because they either talk with locals or actually visit and do research.
I think that early White Wolf did some on the ground stuff where they get a trip to the city for whatever other
Which
reasons, and then they just
look
be
up
like,
like
okay,
local legends and local history.
yeah.
they
I
do
also
they
love
do
that
also
there's a Bruja that's just trolling the university that he doesn't like. Like, come on, where would you
I do like
expect to see that
Hmm?
I do like the
in
fact that
modern
they
White Wolf?
Let MSIT talk, Tech.
the part about the churches and how because many of the elders being of European descent enjoy visiting it and therefore it's kind of Elysium.
Yeah,
It's expected you don't start shit there because the elder will kick your ass, especially since they put so much effort in making it look to their tastes. Don't fuck with it.
yeah,
I do like though that you have a college spat.
yeah,
They go into DePaul and they actually tell you what each part of the neighborhoods are.
yeah. They also talk about the
Paul.
suburbs.
Oh, and also here's a bit of a nod. Like, here's the thing: World of Darkness has actually been always quite progressive. They mention Newtown and how it's the site of the LGBT community there. Like,
Yeah,
it's basically like a little San Francisco, very diverse. It's also home to the Chicago Cubs and Wrigley Field,
Woo!
yeah. The news that the Cubs are
which
able to win 10
occasionally
games recently is
football,
received with
which
enthusiasm.
no, which occasional baseball, like, the minor riots or like complaints that happened in like the 80s and 90s. That's from actual hyper vampire fans that were like
Like,
cheering on the
yeah,
Cubs.
gotta
So
go Cubs,
question:
go Cubs.
what explains the curse for the Cubs? Because
They
again,
pissed
this
off
time they haven't won.
a vampire that owned the team pissed off a fucking wizard or something. I don't know.
I
No,
like the no, I figured it out.
I
A vampire and a mage made a bet in 1895 about some event happening. The vampire fucking welched, and the mage is like, "Oh, okay, all right. Your favorite baseball team? Sprippity spoopity. You're not gonna ever win a World fucking Series, mate. The only reason they won one
They
as
did.
of late is because of is because the vampire finally got his revenge.
I
No,
know
the vampire got fucking ashed. That's
no
why it happened.
I go it's paradox.
It's
The
paradox.
paradox finally destroyed that mage, and with it the curse.
Oh no, the curse is the paradox.
Yeah.
Oh, and it finally just
Permanent
got
paradox
resolved.
that they could, and by some means they won.
But yes, they
It
go and
makes like
It took a
Bartman
they talk about
paradox to break the paradox.
yeah they talk about
yeah.
but yeah they on the next couple of pages they show like a thing of the north side. They show some of the more locales, the
The
suburbs,
bars,
Gary, Indiana. They talk about a little bit,
the
and then Elysium, which is
outlands.
actually Elysium on page 41. I think is the most interesting part though so
Specific
far
locales there,
personally in terms
suburbs.
of
Yep.
like how things are going.
Gary. Gary.
Elysium is, and I like this bit here, which is that it's also funny here to note that Gary is actually closer to Chicago than some of Chicago's suburbs.
It is like
Yeah.
it's right on the
Yes.
border of it's right on the border with Illinois. And
And they bring
let's
up
see, developed Outlands area or an independent city with its own prince. Hardly anyone ever agrees on its status.
Yeah,
Woden's laws are barely enforced. Gary's basically the seedy part, like where there's no authority.
that's why Juggler's out there and all that sort of stuff. If my real OGs for the vampire will have some story with Juggler.
Yeah.
but funny enough they bring up the airports. They bring up O'Hare, they bring up Midway, and then I don't know how to pronounce it. Megas or Meigs? That closes down 2003, so
Yeah,
Well, it was made in 1991. What do you expect?
I know
yeah,
it's just like yeah, you're not gonna be able to use that modern day.
yeah. But yeah, they have the rules of Elysium, which is actually quite good. They talk about it, which is basically no violence is permitted, or you're going to get blood hunted.
Yep.
Uh,
Because again, this is a concept that's not familiar with players at this point. This is one of the first
it's
few
still new.
books.
It's still new, so they're kind of reinforcing what the Elysium rules might look like. Elysium is neutral ground. No conflict may be carried onto it. Elders like to meet and appreciate fine arts and other stuff and talk and all that, and avoid politics at Elysium. You don't talk that sort of stuff. This is a place where we can all relax.
I'm just now
Access is
envisioning
not limited.
I'm just envisioning them trying to appreciate art, and you have another vampire who's in there showing the
Yeah.
art of reverse belch singing.
Well,
I also like this detail too. So it's like access is not limited, so everyone's welcome. However, depending on what elder is at what building, if you're going there, it's assumed that you're probably in with that elder or trying to get in with that elder.
Yeah, it's a
Makes
visual
sense.
it's a visual thing.
mm,
And also,
there's an
here's the thing: just because Elysium's safe, if you decide to be an asshole and like style up to a guy that you oppose, yeah, you're safe in that
Yes.
Elysium until you step out.
Yeah, they mentioned that too.
they mention as sort of an example for an unformed child reveling his newfound powers may decide to dominate a curator. He gains access to a sealed vault in the Art Institute where he scrawls, "Fools, I can go wherever I want" on a valuable painting. He could rightfully claim ignorance, but it would be an adequate defense.
Because in mortal
Uh,
life, doing something like that would get your shit wrecked.
and in this
Yeah,
case, it gets them
and
a blood hunt.
yeah, don't get a blood hunt, folks. A blood hunt is basically free reign to diablerize your fucking ass.
And I forget, if you diablerize somebody of a lower generation, what does that do?
You
Nothing.
depends.
You might
Like,
pick up a discipline at most. And even then, it stains your soul. It's not recommended.
well, with lower generation, we're talking about closer to Cain, right?
No, I meant,
He,
If
I
you're
meant
because
he meant like, okay, you're an 11th generation enforcer. There's a blood hunt on little shit 13th gen who pulled that.
yeah, you won't gain shit
You
out of that.
drink him.
unless you are addicted to
Diablerie,
vitae.
yeah. More likely addicted to Diablerie. They do talk about Diablerie in this book as well, I think. Uh, again, it's just a very well written book, and we've spent like we've spent like an hour crawling over how well it's written because it really is.
Also, yes, I agree, Jim. A funnier thing is you see them like talking about like the great new neoclassical works, the neo-Gothic works of like a statue, and then in the background, as like
Just
the
like some throat
Nosferatu,
singing.
it's a Nosferatu demonstrating Mongolian throat singing that he picked up from his
Yeah,
boys in the East.
yeah. There's like stuff like that where they also talk about like how visiting Kindred are notified and like all that where it's like when it comes to art and performance, don't feed on them in general, like things like that where they're talking about things like
Oh,
that. Of course, the primogen can also say this building is Elysium for the night, or the
yep.
prince will say it
Well, it
because
has to be voted upon by the other primogens, and then the prince is the final decider.
yeah, which of course is it's like it is extremely unwise to violate it, as Elysium is one of the few things that primogen and Loden agree on, is that the sanctity of Elysium should not be violated because, god damn it, they want to look at paintings. They're old.
Like
They just,
them.
I'm just envisioning like the old vampire, like one of them's in Elysium's is like a small natural park, and you just see a very old vampire feeding the ducks. And
The
then
ducks, his
some
ghoul
little
ducks.
neonate shit tries to like terrorize the ducks, and the vampire just frowns, saying, "I wouldn't do that." And then he's like, "Why?" And then it turns out the ducks were his ghoul friends, and they
Yeah.
destroy the fucking neonate.
Wait, can
It's
you
like
ghoul
it's like
animals?
the ghoul. It's like you can
He
ghoul animals.
he bakes the corn, he bakes the bird seed with a little bit
Yeah,
of his blood.
he like soaks the corn seed in his vitae or whatever. So
They've been his
that'll
friend.
work.
They've been his friends ever since he lived in Chicago in the 1920s. He wanted to make sure they stayed with him.
Oh man. But yes, they have of course like they talk about like the rack and other areas of Chicago. They're
Yep,
talking about
Art
like where you can
Institute,
feed.
the Lyric Opera, the Symphony Orchestra, which is one of the Elysiums, by the way.
Yep. Then they talk about some of the nightclubs. Uh, where it's like the Blue Velvet
Oh
nightclub, which
shit!
is one
No,
of
no,
the
no. Before you go, look back into the University of Chicago. It also has a very active paranormal psychology department engaged in a number of environmental studies across the cities.
it's a fucking Ghostbusters reference. Yeah.
So you could have Professor Stans. Like if you fuck up a Masquerade violation, have Professor Stans and Venkman just show up with like their fucking EKG meters, look at you, go, "Oh shit!" Bust out like the flamethrowers.
Speaking of which, do you remember the Ghostbusters video game that came out like in 2009?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
actual third movie, the real third movie.
Yeah, the real third movie. Good game. I just
Also,
kind of
the
reminded
last
me of that
in a
idea.
trilogy, the last of a trilogy. There's only 3.
Yeah. We don't talk about the other 2.
Hey Shane, you just missed a really amazing Ghostbusters reference. Another thing about Chicago University is because while it's not an Elysium, vampires usually don't fuck with people because of the tourist aspect of it.
Yes.
It's relatively safe, so it's actually not just a haven for the Ghostbusters, but other but hunters in general. Hunters in general often
Yeah,
rally
witch
here.
hunters use it as a haven. Yes. So I do
There's
like
also a
the
neo-pagan temple. I think it's on the west side that's actually owned by mages.
yes. There's another one that's
And
owned by
also there is
werewolves.
a non-0% chance while you're sleeping on the Amtrak like a hobo, a werewolf will just show up and eat you. But yeah, the rack. Here
Yeah.
we go.
So they talk about the rack where it's like the area around Rush Street, basically.
It's like a little free-for-all. Usually these are pretty... This is where
It's
you
where you
can
go to
usually
feed.
feed.
Yeah, and the term "the rack" for an area of the city is kind of a classic vampire thing, where it's just this is the area where it's easy to feed because there's a lot of nightclubs, there's a lot of drunk people around, there's a lot of homeless people around. Whatever, it's a place where you can get an easy meal without having to look too hard.
Yep, and then they mention lushes because this is an actual thing that vampires can experience where, similar to the Venture, if they tend to drink of a specific type of blood, they can become addicted to it. Like if they drink, because they get a little bit of the effects of the drugs.
Yeah,
So if you're a vampire that has a habit of feeding on crackheads, unfortunately you're now a crackhead, and you have to keep eating crackheads.
yes. So the blue velvet, by the way, they talk about this where it is the no one knows who the owner of the club is, but the rumor is it's a vampire. It has been since 1972, mostly catering to the Kindred community. It has went through several incarnations as a prohibition speakeasy, an Irish pub, a blue collar tavern, and a gay bar.
Yep.
Uh,
Right
the
now it's mainly specializing for clientele, but yeah.
but yes, the interesting thing is that the doorman Ian Gibson has an unfailing ability to pick out vampires. He has proven immune to domination and has never answered any questions about his ability or his employer.
Which
That's
is
kind
a
of
neat
interesting.
touch. It's a neat touch, and they
Yeah,
don't ever explain it, which is good.
Oh,
yeah, they basically say do what you want with this plot. Then there's the Cave, which is north of the Succubus Club. The Succubus Club is the hangout for the elite and the trendy types who roam Rush Street. The Cave is for everyone else. It is only stocked with beer and hard liquor, and it's for construction workers, bikers, and underpaid city employees. There are.
It's your rough tavern. This is where your brew hop
I
beat
love the
down motherfuckers usually go.
I love
unsurprisingly,
the
the
description of this
Gangrels.
place, though.
uh,
It lives up to its name. One dirty, unlit sign hangs over the steps leading down to a basement entrance. A 15-foot hallway leads back into the bar itself. Along the hallway, in 2-foot intervals, are a series of antique door knockers, ranging from gargoyles to mermaids. There are no doors, just door knockers.
I like the line. Unsurprisingly, the men are typical macho types. If they're impressed by the physical appearance of a newcomer, they will often offer him a seat, buy him a drink, and ask him, "How about them bears?"
Yeah.
Women are treated courteously enough, even by bikers. The regulars may buy an attractive woman a drink simply to keep her in the bar.
Oh, and they actually stat out or not stat, but they discuss regular bartenders, Fred Marine.
Yep.
Fred is a man in his late
Yep.
Horace the
40s.
chess player. That's another one.
Yes. He's a
Who's a
secret
secret
patron of
patron.
the Anarchs.
Perks.
There's Fred and Marine. Those are their bartenders. And again,
He's a
the thing
Malkavian. Yeah.
that's kind of the beautiful thing is like there's these little bit characters, and the best part is they actually have character details in the chapter that covers this.
Yes. They also then here's the Succubus
And they
Club. Now
actually
the interesting thing
no
about
no. They also say for more info on the cave, you have to see Ashes to Ashes because that came before.
Yeah, like there's more information. Yeah. Then the thing about the Succubus Club is that the Succubus Club actually gets its own splat book expansion. The
Yep.
thing about it, and what's interesting is, I'm not going to describe too much about it, but the thing is that it has actual succubuses. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
It is
As
ran
in
by an actual succubus.
Yes.
Demon the Fallen Succubus?
Yes,
Yes.
but maybe not. Like it's a bit different.
It's hinted that it's likely yes.
But yes, the Succubus Club is a supplement that was also released around this time, and it details more into that. But that is an actual
In
thing that they were playing around with in early World of Darkness. Was how
was
much of the
demons.
weird other spooky stuff is in this world?
Well,
Because we've got the vampires detailed out, and we've got some information about mages, and there may be a god and all this other stuff, but like we don't really go into demons much. Well, here's their first time doing that.
Getting
didn't you say
tinny
that
again, by the
the
way.
Oh, sorry.
didn't you say that the Sabbat were pretty much characterized as demon worshippers?
No,
In
they were
first
never really
edition,
fluffed at
yes
this
and no.
period.
They had some fluff in the core book, but the demon worshipping stuff is more. And it kind of comes along with the other expansions and talks about
Again,
that.
the
Like,
Sabbat weren't really heavily fleshed out. They were seen as kind of this opposition, very intimidating, mysterious force threat. You knew they were vampires, and they gave you a little bit of their description, like their structures and descriptions. They hunt in packs. They mention they have the equivalent of like a pack like the very basic of like a street gang. They tell you about that, but they're more akin to like Seven VII, where they don't go into heavy details on what they're actually like or what their goals are. And they started leaning a little more heavily into them being demon worshippers before they walked that back and actually sat down and wrote them out. Like, and this happened over the course of first edition. Because what happened was people thought that the Sabbat were like interesting and wanted to learn more about them, and then you had the people that were like, "I want to play this," and so they had to sit down and go, "Well, how the fuck are the Sabbat? Okay, are they demon worship? No, we can make a demon worshiping group of vampires, but they're not that." And that's
more
kind of
accurately,
what
there are
happens.
demon worshipping vampires, which is infernalism stuff, and then they have books on that too. But like the Sabbat are portrayed as them, but they're not. But they then have a problem with demon worshippers among them because, well, you
Again,
know,
this is what happened is they release a book and then they get they get fan input because they actually would actively listen to it, their fan base. I know it's a novel concept.
They, they would do such a silly thing as that. Don't they know that the people who write the
Uh,
books are superior to them?
well, I mean, they're also quite creative. Like Phil by this point was already going, look, you know what's really cool is that we're talking about magics. Let's actually have mages. So he's already been plotting in his head at this point, probably. How would mages work?
but yeah, a lot of the other stuff after
Like
this is just more detail
it's
about
all
like
nucleating. It's in their head, but they've not written it down yet.
They'll just take Phil 15 ayahuasca trips.
Oh no, he would have done that even without inspiration, man. But anyway, yeah, there's the hive. This is the loop.
yep. If we want to get through this,
Marshall Fields and Company. I'm just gonna go quickly. Marshall Fields and Company. It's a fairly abandoned series of business. Eventually, they got bought out. It's more the Tremere section now.
yeah, the Tremere
Nachin
control area.
Brentanos, which is a service store. It's your obscure books. This is where you find like actual books by like the Mad Arab Abdullah Hazred and shit
And
like that.
they imply that maybe the owner is in fact a wizard, a mage.
Yep. They also
Then they
mention a Katif for the first time here,
then
I
they
mentioned
bring
them
up
earlier times, but yeah, then there's Sears Tower, of course,
aka
which
Willis Tower, but no one
apparently
says anything.
they say that the Sears Tower contains more office space than any other building in the U.S.
except the Pentagon.
Which was true at the time. It was actually true at the time.
Yeah. Then they talk about like some other areas, like the Barrens, which is basically anywhere that vampires don't want to go. Then they talk about more about Gary. Then the
Yeah, because Barrens, there's some rough areas that you don't want to go, even for vampires, Chiraqs,
And then
the
they bring up
underground.
Cabrini Green.
Yep.
which is described aptly the American dream gone awry. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a fucked up place.
Yeah. Then of course we get
It's,
another piece of Trace art,
This
but
is this is
it's so cool.
basically Chiraq this is Chiraq dialed to 11. This is
Yeah.
like your South Side gone horribly wrong.
Then they of course talk about the Kindred, and this is a long section of the book, and by long section I
Beautiful
mean this is
art
most of
here.
the rest of the fucking book.
Beautiful book. Beautiful art
It is
here.
beautiful art, and you will not see it all else in this section. So
So let's quickly go through the king. There's like 70 vampires, so we'll just go real fucking quick, I think.
the plus and the minus is they even tell you a bunch of traits and what their secrets are, and like how many secrets they have, and who knows secrets and who doesn't, and the five little rating stuff and all this. And good God, there is so much in this.
so we
Yeah,
have
like
Like,
F is your basic bog standard person, and then it goes up all the way up to A plus.
yeah, like
Which, as a cheeky nod, A plus. The character knows
just like you,
everything,
like
just like
well
you
after
after reading
reading
this
this
book.
book.
which is cute.
Like early White Wolf has the habit of occasionally breaking the fourth wall like that, where they just go like, okay,
They save it for very rare moments, which is good.
yeah, but yes, they go into the Bruja, they go into all this. They have like, here's who's related to who and what generation they are, and if they're deceased or not.
Oh, they also tell you right
Uh,
here. Here's the example of what secrets would rate as. Like
yes,
the
they do.
rating for secrets are here.
Yes, like if this was a value in like a skill or like a 5 dot rating, which is kind of fun. Like a trait, like you want to increase your trait, you can use your experience, and you can gain more secrets and character
By the
like
way,
that,
hello
which
there,
is kind of neat.
NDR3655 and Ossel. Wait, is there another way for vampire to taste food like through blood? No, not really.
Not really.
What
You
they
have
what
to
they
have the
instead
merit.
get is it is essentially ambrosia, and how good the ambrosia is in relation to the physical and mental shape of the person, also spiritual to a degree. Basically, if you get like a dirty, like almost about to die of heart failure hobo on the street going keto, it would taste pretty bad, but like if you only had rats for your whole life, it's amazing. It gets better from there.
But yeah,
It's an indescribable feeling that it's like explaining red to a person who's blind or colorblind.
but yes, the
So yeah, let's go through. There's
let's go through a
Menele.
couple of these. This is Menelaus. I'm just gonna we're gonna pick out a couple of ones that I like. Critias is an interesting character, which
Menele's
is
like one of
the
the main one of the main like ultra
yeah,
plotters. So
Critias. Yeah, Critias is
He's
actually
the
his
doctor.
here's the
tutor.
family line.
Yeah, the doctor. So he was behind the Mithridatic Wars, by the way, um, which is like, you have to understand, for your average person who would be in here, this is the vampire that is behind the social wars, also behind the Mithridatic Wars, all because of Carthage.
Yeah,
He
basically he's
doesn't
been around
actually
since the
know.
late Republic.
He also doesn't know that he has been basically manipulated by Manele for the longest time, until finally, after 1415, he was in fact kind of released from that control, after which he was in a monastery in Switzerland for a while, then came to the New World, went to Baltimore after the Revolutionary War, enjoyed all the stuff about like the nature of like, oh, this is a lot like Athens again, and is having a lot of fun hanging out in Chicago, being an old school Bruja, which I
Which I
kind
think
of
more
like.
people need to think about when they play around. Less whining about Carthage, more actually being the dapper as fuck dude who can lay down a fist.
Now,
Yeah, of
interesting.
course, being an
Yeah.
Athenian, he is quite sexist.
Yes,
Yes,
he
he's
he is.
horrendously.
Decided preference for good-looking young men of great intellectual distinction.
Yeah,
Is of course he does. He's
yeah.
Athenian.
His retainers
Another
are
thing
all
he is a big
dreary
fan of.
philosophy students.
Well, no, here's another thing. He's also infuriating to talk to. This is another aspect because he plays via the Aristotle school and Socratic school, where you'll ask him a question, 9 times out of 10, if it's not worth his time, he will then respond with a question to force you to think on it again. That's the type of guy he
You,
is.
I know. I love that apparently in his haven, he just wears his robes that he had from Athens, like in the
I
same
mean,
style.
wouldn't you?
He has a closet of them, and I just think that's so funny.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I'm imagining then after you saw Animal House, he decided to actually wear that out once.
I would not be surprised. He
Oh
probably
no, oh
found it
no, he
funny.
he does it he does it every Halloween too.
He also has influence in like the legal system, and he
The
says that
federal
half of
court
the
system.
yeah, like he's got a lot of influence. Again, this is
Well,
early
he
Vampire where the
hobnobbed with
vampire's
some of the
behind
founding
everything.
But
fathers. Yes.
yeah,
Yes,
which again,
so
bear in mind that the distinction. Federal. That means if this is going out of state, he's got control of it.
yeah,
He has enough
uh,
knowledge on the legal system. Like, I mean, probably at least the federal concepts. I think he'd be fucked if he tried to argue local law.
yeah. I do love his stat line though of like philosophy 7
Oh no, no, I
and
love his
debate
I love
7.
his blood pool. 40 max per turn 8.
40, yeah, because he's a fifth
And
generation vampire with a
Yeah,
that's
humanity of
humanity 7.
7, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah, this is a guy that is very very much like you could see him on the street and you'd think he's still human. He's also almost 2,000 years. He's over 2,000 years old.
Because he just keeps on finding new things to be fascinated by in his eternity.
Yeah,
He
like
basically is the epitome of always keep learning because when you stop, you die.
yeah, I
That's a kind of like, yeah, he's a grouchy bastard, but at the end of the day, he kind of is probably in love and fascinated with how humanity's evolved over time.
yeah, he's also the only primogen who is completely ignorant of the conflict of the Methuselahs. It's an intellectual blind spot. Again, I just think that this is a fun character in like if you're talking about early vampire, this is the kind of character that they create a lot of, and I can't blame them. This is just fun.
What really would ultimately damage the World of Darkness is they kept making them, and it became harder to try to find that creativity. Patricia
Yeah.
Bolingbroke, so the
Also known
14th
as
century.
Hi.
Tyler, who's another Bruja. She was involved in the Anarch revolts, like the OG Anarch revolts.
Hmm.
Um,
She actually was among the revolutionaries who murdered the Archbishop of Canterbury, by the way.
yep.
Like she was part of I think they were called the Troubles? Not the
But yes,
Troubles.
she's also the
No, it's
one
called
that
I think it was called the Anarchy.
The
uh,
troubles are modern.
Yeah.
this is the Anarch revolt is what it's known as.
No, no, not the
She's the one that
vampire
kicked it
term.
off.
Like the specifically English where they
That
kicked out. Like she was around that time
the
when the
Anarchy is what
beginning of
it's
the
literally called the Anarchy.
yeah.
Well,
Got it
actually,
right
no.
on my second one.
In 1380, that's late for that. That's not the Anarchy. That's something else.
Ah,
Don't know what it is then. Whatever.
She
it's
has
some of
The
them.
humanity
point,
5.
yeah, the point though is that she is actually one of the first to diablerize an elder. Namely, uh, she diablerized Hargrave the Elder, if I remember correctly. You know that guy, one of the OG Methuselahs of Ventru.
Yep.
And she's her haven is an isolated hangar at O'Hare.
Yeah.
Yes, she controls O'Hare Airport. That's her thing.
There's Blackjack right here with his ape face.
Yeah. Then we get into the other art like
Carl.
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 Carl tried to start a communist revolution. Anyway,
Yeah.
um, then we
Saint.
get Beatnik. Uh,
Bongos
I
intensify.
Bongos intensify. Then we get
Daddy
Daddy
D.
D.
Look at that shit. The
Look at
original
that
Chad.
chin.
The original Chad
Then
meme.
there's
Oh my
Anita
god, you're right.
Wainwright.
It is Chad.
It is Chadicus Maximus. Yeah. Then we get the sheriff actually.
Yep. Wainwright.
There's Wainwright,
It
and then
looks like
after
he's
that
from the
is
south, not from Chicago.
Ah, Balthazar. Look at him. He
He was from the South, yes.
he's
He
based on
then
he's
moved
based
up
on the sheriff from the
to
Dukes of Hazzard. Yeah.
yeah. Then he moved up to there, and he's actually like a lackey,
Unwilling to
and
return
he's
to a defeated South. He's a lost
yes.
causer.
But yes, the thing is that sheriff would have been was a also is also a title, of course, in Vampire for generally the person that enforces the prince's will, and that's kind of what this guy does. There's a few other kind of like
I love that
there's a
he's this lost causer.
Oh, go to
yeah,
is it Travis Fett?
There's a bunch.
Travis, yes, Travis Fett is interesting.
Or no, I'm thinking of the guy Damien. No, Damien.
Damien
'Cause
is a
he's four.
14-year-old boy that's stuck
Yeah, he's.
in a Kindred's
This is
body. Yeah,
why you don't embrace a person who's not fully grown.
But here's the other thing. He's 6th generation.
Well, yeah,
yep,
because he's Critias's kid.
yeah,
Oh God.
yeah.
Critias is
Well,
an
of course, it's
asshole and he likes
Athenian.
him young.
Oh
He's
God.
Athenian.
You
Come
didn't
on.
think about that, did ya?
No.
Yeah,
But at the same
Critias
time,
is
that's definitely
quite
you.
repulsive.
Honestly, you bring this character in when your players think that they, you know, to show your players, yeah, don't judge a book by its cover.
Well, yeah, he's relatively educated. Also, very much a thrill seeker. His best friend's a Malkavian, which that's going to be fun.
By the way, uh, Genghis. I love the description of Genghis here. Oh my god.
He rebels impulsively and reflexively. He was
He's
created. There he is. He, he pierced his nose with a fucking safety pin.
Yes, he also has a face tattoo.
He
By
has
the
two.
way, the fun thing is Roy
He has
appears
the
like a punk when he goes about the world. Genghis has a well-kept condo where he likes to watch Chicago Bulls games and cook meals for a number of yuppie friends he has somehow made over the years. They don't realize he's a vampire, what an absurd idea, of course, but they do know he's somewhat weird. Somewhat weird.
it's like an
he has
off-brand
humanity
version of the
7.
Kurgan.
Well, that's the idea. He's basically like this. This is the type of guy you'd see like in a '70s gang drama movie. You know, the guy who crawls out of like the sewers
Yeah,
looting.
he's a caitiff.
But
He's 12th generation though, which is a little bit better than your standard. But caitiff are basically just anarchs, you know.
yeah, they mentioned that Caitiff has. This is actually where they go into them.
Caitiff just generally in this, I think at this point meant disinherited by your clan,
Yep.
or disavowed by your clan.
It wasn't the your blood failed. It's this is you were banished. Because again, first generation had some differences. Oh God, look at this.
Look at the art.
He looks like Donald Trump in his fucking prison
he
photo.
he looks like Donald Trump as made by some of those like weird fucked up AI artists that want to fucking old obese white man
Like
that
no, it's
fucking
like
colors his skin orange.
Donald
You
Trump
know the one.
mixed with Patrick Bateman and Fancy Squidward.
The evil, the
Oh
love
no!
child of Patrick Bateman and Donald Trump.
Oh no!
I can make the
My,
best
what's his
cursed
name?
offspring.
There,
I can make the best love
there.
children.
Wait. Who played Gordon
it's
Gekko?
It's Donald Trump as drawn by Ben Garrison.
Who played Gordon Gekko?
Oh God, I don't
I
remember.
don't know.
But yes,
It don't
the
matter.
caitiff. Yeah,
Well,
they talk
no,
about the
because the
caitiff.
name.
Oh yeah, he's based on that. It's fine. It's fine. We can move
Yeah,
on. Come
It's
on,
I
man.
fine.
thought it was like
It don't
Keaton
matter.
something.
It don't matter. None of this
It
matters.
really doesn't
All right,
matter.
next up, the S&M lady.
Madame Zavrinsky. There she is. She runs the brothel. That's her thing.
Uh, there's a few other kind of things like there's a guy named Dickie, of course. Then we've got Carol Davis, who's the
There's Dickie,
Malda
punk.
Mala Davis, who is
Mal Davis is pretty important.
the thing is here's the interesting thing here. Remember Maxwell?
Yeah.
It's implied here that she is his children.
And this is again another kind of hint that it's entirely possible that that this is back again.
Wait,
This is
no,
back.
I misread this. I misread that. Her sire, I think, is actually the Dusable, who is the my bad on that. That was a Tremere. She's a Tremere.
Which again, this is back when Caitiff meant exile. It didn't necessarily
Yeah, she
meant.
doesn't actually have any. She doesn't have any there. I misread that because I missed the Tremere bit in there. I was like, oh wait, no.
Basically, this is
Again,
again back when Caitiff meant exile, not
yes,
weird
not
clan
its own kind of like
disability.
And in turn, she sires Darren Stack.
Is it weird, by the
Mhm.
way, that I actually think that the original approach is kind of smarter? Is it weird I kind of think
Eh,
that?
No, it makes sense.
I kind of like that
And
more.
then we have a Jimmy, who is a fucking caitiff that is been Balthazar sired and the sheriff.
I swear Jimmy's been traced from that art style is very familiar. That's
no,
like a
I like.
mangaka artist.
No, wait. I like this. Embrace just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh,
and
seven
of course
years old too. Lovely.
Wait,
we got
Child, literally.
yeah. Then we got the gangrel. Kind of nothing.
good job,
Oh
Balthazar.
God, this art
Yeah,
for
Balthazar is an
Sledgehammer
amazing
Doyle.
person.
Oh God, what?
Oh, are we going into
But they're trying
Inyaga?
to do like a
Choose
mummy.
different Imogen. It doesn't matter really.
No, they're trying to
Again,
go.
like
They're trying to go with old. This was an attempt to go old Native American.
That's a native
That's the attempt.
with the.
no, she's not. She's
Oh, I'm dumb. She's from
That's
Africa.
Egyptian. Yeah, that
I'm dumb. Sorry. It's
she
just
at
lived
least.
among the people who had become the Zulu
I'm dumb.
and traveled Africa.
Then why does she become the Egyptian?
I'm dumb.
And why is she a gangrel? Because the fuck there's well then again this is because this is before Kindred of the Ebony Kingdoms, so that'd be why.
Yeah, this is back when African
Oh,
vampire. This is back before they realized that each race has its own different soul.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
That's a real
Oh,
thing
by
that,
the way,
yeah.
she can turn into a fucking leopard.
Mm-hmm. That's her version of Protean.
where
Yeah.
where does?
No, it's leopard
Oh,
form. By the way, this heavily hints that she's kind of partially responsible for the death of the zoo thieves.
Yep. Also, there is this Sledgehammer Doyle.
Look at this specimen.
oh, definitely one was taken to his face.
Look at this creature. He talks to cattle.
He talked to
You sure he's
cows.
not Nosferatu?
No, it's just that he. How the fuck does this guy have an intelligence of 3 when he falls in love with cow? I don't know.
Because he's
Also,
mentally ill.
yeah. Anyway, there's also a few others. There's the Wolf Pack, which are a group
There's
of
Rose,
gangrel
the wolf.
vampire bikers. By the way,
The top head doesn't match the bottom.
I know. Then
Dread.
look at the drip of the pencil mustache of Dread. Jesus.
Yeah, that's a face that screams dread.
Yeah.
Antheus looks like he
Then there's
looks like no.
Ramrod.
Antheus looks like he's about to get photographed for the sex offender registry.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Well, he is Greek.
Yeah.
Maybe he has
Then
some
we get
connection with
no,
Ramrod.
that's Critias,
doctor.
man. Critias is the one who did the things to the poor teenager.
No, well, Critias at least didn't do to a fucking child like the sheriff did.
Yeah. Critias at least has no. It's still what you think. But then again, at the end of the day, he's like 2 gajillion years old, and he can destroy you by just touching you. So you got to keep that
Yeah,
in
he can
mind.
just keep pose in your general direction and destroy you. So you know.
Like you just gotta fucking roll with it.
Yeah. There's
A
also
wipe.
Sledge, who's a wipe, who is a
Racing
an,
fanboy.
yeah, and then there's Sledge, who is a well, he's a ghoul.
Yeah. Ah, here we go.
Uh,
Malkavians. They're the most enigmatic
no,
because
no, wait. It was an
Oh
O'Leary
fuck!
that
Here's
caused the
Madame
fire.
O'Leary. She
It
caused the
was.
fire. She was the cow.
I was right.
She
She's
actually was
still alive
terrified.
also.
She was terrified of Boston. Oh, it is. Is she still around? There she is.
She's the oldest Malkavian alive in Chicago and recently began seeing herself as the matriarch of an extended family. She's still suicidal, however, and with the aid of several other Malkavians who all died in the flames, she set a fire in 1871, which she hoped would kill her.
But it didn't, and she was
Ironically,
very upset.
her haven, which is the infamous O'Leary's house, was one of the few buildings that actually survived.
Yeah, that actually happened.
Yeah. Her virtues, by the way, she has 0 conscience, 2 self-control, and 1 courage.
Yeah,
Humanity
she's
2.
gone. She's almost
Role-playing
gone.
hints. You're nuts.
Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're depressed and basically just seek oblivion.
Yeah, then O'Leary has son, who is a extremely sick individual.
You
And
can tell by his face. Look at that. That's the face of a serial
You can also
killer.
you can also tell by this. Humanity 0.
yeah,
Oh, fun.
he's a fucking white. By rules as written, he's an actual white. Or he's on a path.
Well, no, because remember, he had humanity 0 before he was embraced.
Oh, yeah, that
At the
carryover.
age of like at the age of 6 or 7, he got to start ripping apart butterflies, not for study, just because he wants them to hurt.
Once put
Yeah.
out another boy's eye on a stick that they were using to toast marshmallows.
Hmm He
Jesus.
basically had no humanity before being embraced. So no, he's basically a white, or he's effectively on a path on accident.
Yeah.
Oh, also he's at least kind of aware, so yes, he is on a path. Yeah, you can tell. You can tell, Jim, that they're kind of inspired a bit by anime. I'm very much of the '70s and '80s variety.
Yeah, Ben Smith is actually decent art. Guy smoking a
Where's
pipe here.
Paula Smith? Where's Ben Smith? Yeah, there he is.
Ben Smith's world went through more changes in a 24-hour period than most babies go through before potty training. His delusions began mildly enough and included belief in the UFOs, the
The
communist
communist
menace, and the
menace and the honesty of
honesty
politicians.
of politicians.
By the time he turned 30, they became more extreme, until the point where he came to believe the sky was orange, clams could talk to him, and the televangelists really did care about the people's spiritual well-being. At this point, a concerned aunt had been committed to the Illinois Psychiatric Institute for his own good. There he languished for a decade beyond the help of doctors or drugs. He very quickly became a member of the herd because,
So
O'Leary and
Uh,
Paula basically used the institution to farm ghouls and to farm blood.
yeah. He looks like an archetypical refrigerator repairman because that's what he did in mortal life.
Humanity
He has
3.
Dominate 4, by the way, which is actually pretty impressive.
Fun fact, he actually believed he was a vampire before being embraced.
Yeah.
And
Also,
Again,
because Ben has the same name as Paula, convinced
he
they're
believes that they were
related and
married. Yeah.
married.
Yep. I think that the institution staff believes him to have escaped in the mid 1960s, and no doctors are still there from the time to fit a face to patients' descriptions of a kindly old gentleman who drinks their blood at night.
By the way, Son, Mr. Serial Killer, is
Yeah,
actually trying to
he's his son.
manipulate this guy into joining him on a very fun ride by letting him go.
Role-playing hints, by the way. Nothing is impossible, and most of the wildest sounding things are almost certainly true. Make up anything you want and stick by it, no matter what evidence is presented to the contrary.
So here's the
So
thing I've
basically,
noticed with Malkavians in this so far. Yes, they're of the fish variety somewhat, but notice how dark that fish Malkavian is. They
one
don't
thing
they don't play haha cute. They play haha. At any point, I might think you're an alien and peel your face off to see the reptilian that lurks underneath the false bio robot you're commanding.
the other thing is they bring up explicit mental illnesses,
Yeah,
which
like it's
I feel like they don't
serious.
bring up anymore.
It is genuinely serious. in some way or another. To give you an
Like,
idea, to give you an idea, Paula also is schizophrenic. That's why she believes it too.
or this guy, the next guy, even Klein. Raymond Falcon is a very skilled musician, just like his father. Dirk McGriff is a police officer, just like his father. Bruce Holmes is gay, just like his father. Lawrence Pierce is a doctor, just like his father. Aaron Whittaker is a vampire, just like his father. And yes, all these are the same person.
So this
Embraced by Sun.
the son basically thought it would be a funny idea to embrace someone with multiple personality disorder. It also is entirely possible that he's orchestrated the conditions to get this poor bastard to be broken in that specific way. Like intentionally making him, putting him in abusive situations to the point where his personality shattered apart. Because
That was,
remember, humanity zero. He could easily orchestrate a person to the point of mental illness and then embrace them.
so at least
Keep
his
that in
Also,
guy is
mind.
it's
Humanity
kind of
7.
it's also interesting. I don't think they ever do this again, but it's that all of his stats, a lot of his stats are marked with a V, and that's for a variable because depending on what his personality is, that will change his stat line.
I like that. This is something that you don't see too often with multiple personality disorder. Because here's the thing, like with disassociative, they have a slightly different personality and attitude, which does affect some of their ability.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's not like some have more than others. They're all equal. It's just distributed.
You want to move on to the Nosferatu then?
Let's see what Horus's insanity is, just very quickly.
They don't really show it.
Interesting. What about Weltman? I'm just doing real quick, you know.
And my guess with him would be actually obsessive compulsive.
Oh, Johann. Oh, for yeah, for Thornbull. Oh, here's one. Here's another one. Is it Son who did this one too? No. So
Morgana.
Johann, he was on his actual deathbed,
Yeah.
like literally
And
just about to die.
now he was a filmmaker,
Actually, no, he does
and
not suffer from the same Malkavian derangements. However, I'm pretty sure he has
his derangement
some.
is that he thinks he is not in fact deranged.
So yeah, the thing is, no, his delusion. He does have delusions. He believes everything will be all right in the end.
Oh no, that's the worst kind of delusion for a Malkavian.
Because here's the thing, they go into this like he doesn't seem like he's insane, but he acts like he's almost self-knowing. Oh no, I figured it out. It's even funnier. Johann is actually a player character. He's staring up at you, the player, breaking the fourth wall. He is operated by a fictional other player in your group, and he's aware of
Oh my!
it. Oh, that's I love it.
Oh my God! You're
That's
right.
that's why he also has an A- in secrets, because he's a metagamer.
Holy fuck.
That's why he has Humanity 10 as well. Because he's technically human.
Yeah. Don't you love it?
Wow, okay.
That's so. Oh god, it's a fourth wall break. Those can usually suck, but no, it fucking worked.
Then we
Oh,
have the Nosferatu, which are based around
aren't
Khalid
you
al
glad
Wahab.
I saw that?
Oh my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so clever.
It may take 2 more hours to complete this, but
Yeah, then we
worth
then
it.
we have a
worth it.
bunch of Nosferatu. They're Nosferatu.
Here's Khalid. Here's his face. He is one of the few. He actually spent his time as a Muslim leader.
Yeah.
As a Muslim, because
Yeah.
they spell it that way.
Anyway,
Just very quickly, in general, he basically was around the time where the Spanish were returning the favor by invading Morocco, so he has a pretty dark bitterness to them, at least initially, and evolved from there.
yeah, I do like that they show the family tree here for him. So he's actually sired 4 vampires,
Mhm.
in the city, and he basically knows everything about everyone.
Oh yeah. They give you an idea. His secret
Makes sense
level
for,
is A+. He knows everything.
again, makes sense for a Nosferatu primogen.
Elzbieta, that's one of his child there.
And then, of course, several of his children.
She's still close to
Jorgus.
them. There's Jurgis. Oh, look at that. He has to eat it little bits. Little bits. He barely has a mouth. He has to like drink through a straw.
Peter and Tammy Walensky.
Yep. So their suffering. He basically embraced them because of their suffering.
Yeah.
He was fascinated by it and decided to preserve their pain forever. Yeah, that's another thing with vampires. You notice something very different, like compared to the 5th edition book we looked at. You notice something interesting about all of them, even the ones with high humanity.
They're fucking awful.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
But aren't they
Yeah.
supposed to be rebels and freedom fighters and
Oh, they can be.
Well,
They can be.
be.
Critias, for example, does occasionally like to poke holes every now and again when he walks around.
Yeah.
Actually,
Oh, by the way,
actually something to
we
bring
have.
up with Peter and Tommy with influence. Their two retainers are the ghosts of their parents.
Yeah,
Oof.
because they played around with it, or at least they see them. By the
So
way,
But
like, I
yes,
mean, were
their
they raised?
humanities are
Nathaniel.
1. They're
But yes,
barely
Nathaniel.
around.
But yes, Nathaniel Bordruff is actually an interesting one where he was a Nosferatu. He was a vampire hunter, then was embraced by a Nosferatu, and then decided to attack the undead as a Nosferatu, which he then was like, "Oh, this kind of sucks."
He is the thing that he hunts his own kind.
This has turned
Yeah,
him
he
into
did.
Humanity Zero, by the way.
Yep. So here's another character that
The
rules as
only
written should not exist.
the only thing, if you're wondering, Nathaniel is keeping him from going full white is his mission. That's all he's focused on at this point. Oh hey, Elucid, like you mentioned.
Oh, then we get the.
Humanity
By the
9.
way, Toreadors are up next, and are you ready for one of the big like kind of drop things of like, so you know the Methuselah that's controlling Loden,
Yeah.
Helena, also known as Portia. Yeah, that's you know, uh,
No.
she caused the Trojan War. She's Helen of Troy.
Ah. Oh yeah, like in the first paragraph. Was Humanity Zero as bad in this very first edition? You became unplayable.
Yeah, so I mean, as player characters, it would make sense, but they were supposed to become like fucking whites. So you know,
Like what this is kind of them kind of prototypically showing that um with psychopaths and sociopaths, Humanity Zero doesn't necessarily turn them into whites because they were already a monster before they turned. At least that's the concept with Sun.
Oh,
As
here's the
for
other
the
thing.
Hunter, it's purely he's guided by his mission at that point. That's the only reason he's not become a complete slavering monster, and even then, he's pretty damn close to it.
Here's something with Helena. She caused the fire.
Oh yeah, she caused all
The
of
Great
these.
Fire.
she did all of this. She's behind
She's
everything.
behind
Yeah.
everything. Why do you think she wears her sunglasses at night like an asshole?
Actually,
By
I
the
don't
way,
know
there
why.
is also the most stereotypical douchebag name of Brett Stryker. Is a Toreador. Brett Stryker.
And here's
Apologies to
Annabelle
any Brett
Trebell,
Stryker. Yeah.
Sophia
And again,
Ayes, Brett Stryker. There he is, the action cop.
I'm sorry, but your name.
Jimbro.
I'm sorry if you actually have the name Brett Stryker, but it's a name that sounds made up and that of
Brett
douchebag.
Stryker is murder cop. Cleaning
Right.
one neighborhood with a body count at a time, coming for theaters near you.
Yeah. So then we've got
1990.
the Tremere as well, and the Tremere are pretty standard Tremere. It's a small coterie.
Here's some
They
other
give
minor
you
people. Hey, look,
yeah,
it's
they give you
Gomez
a bunch
Adams.
of Yep. They also give you a bunch of
Abraham
rituals
Lincoln,
for them.
this guy, this girl, and here we go. There's the
But
Tremere.
I like Abraham Lincoln,
And the
Sir
Tremere
Henry
are,
Johnson, sir.
yeah. Also, I should mention that they do give you a lot of new rituals for the Tremere in this, which is actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, this is the first time they kind of got really expanded like they did.
Well, less that and more, it's like they put in a bunch of stuff just for them. That's kind of
Oh look,
nice.
it's the Yaranaika face.
Yeah. Here's Loden,
Do you want to
and
do
as
it?
you can see,
That's that face.
almost.
Oh god,
Oh
it's off
God.
center. It's off center too.
Anyway, the Ventru they mention here, and that show just how many he's actually sired. And the answer to that is he sired
Your
basically
average
every single Ventru
redditor,
in the city.
sexual predator. Like you're getting faster, so I'm trying to show them these like some lady.
Because I want to get to a certain character
Loden.
Is that a
here with a
rabbi?
hat.
Here's Loden. Look, he has elf ears. He
Yep,
looks like a bat.
there's
Actually,
Loden.
no, he looks like a BattleTech commander. Actually,
Yeah, and then there's like again you can see all of his children. He's got a lot of them,
yeah. Here's
a
Tommy.
lot,
We're
of them.
just gonna skip this guy, the fat comptroller looking motherfucker. His name's Eddie. Here's
Yeah, guy with no
Horatio. Look at
chin.
his fucking chin. He looks like
And here we go.
fucking Hoggus Greedley. Lawrence Ballard.
No, right
Alan
after that,
Sovereign.
actually. Right after that.
Oh, here he is.
Yep. So this is one of the things that just kind of popped up in this book. It's Al Capone. Al Capone is a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Al Capone is making maneuvers to try to take over the city.
Without vampiric
He
help.
also his preferred feeding is off of a beautiful black-eyed pure-blooded Italian woman, which he is now importing from Italy because they're getting rarer and rarer to find in Chicago.
Yep. Another thing is, I mentioned all of them. Al Capone gets brought up in several other clan books.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Capone has a B plus information. He he has a lot of muscle and he has control over all aspects of crime in Chicago. He has an old Tommy gun which he will use upon his upon enemies if needed.
you know what I'm thinking as like an interesting chronicle.
Oh no, it's even more
Capa-
cursed than that.
well,
No, let me finish. There's one thing you
okay.
missed in role-playing notes. After having
You
watched the
have to be
plethora of your glory in real life in Hollywood, you're mimicking movie you. You've gone full
also
ham.
he lives beneath an Italian restaurant.
Well, yeah.
He lives underneath an Italian restaurant.
But I'm thinking either he sees like The Sopranos, and he either forces you
Sopranos
to
isn't
read.
even out yet.
I know, but
It's like a
this would be
decade out.
later. Like if it was updated to like modern day, you have him watch The Sopranos, and he's either incredibly pissed and demands a hit on James Gandolfini, despite not knowing he's dead, or he tries to recreate The Sopranos.
No, no. What happened is he tried to kill Al Pacino. The biopic Scarface, it had pissed him off because that ain't how
Oh,
I am. That ain't how I am. Tries to murder Al Pacino.
Yeah. There's also Kevin Jackson, who's planning to who's embraced a bunch of people in LA and is planning on taking over the city from Loden at some point, like basically all of Loden's brood.
By the way, this
oh,
confirms that Chook Look is a Ventru. Here he
yeah.
is.
Yep, there he is.
To make my venture not a Quajin.
Well, guys, Quajian weren't a thing until second gen.
He was actually
Uh,
embraced by Capone, I think.
Mm-hmm.
and he only feeds on ex-Vietnam vets.
Again, Quajian. They might have maybe been mentioned in first gen, but it's like right at the end of the first edition. This is
Yeah,
before they really thought through on stuff like that.
yeah, we're
And,
kind of coming towards the end of this book, but
yep.
again, there's so much shit in this book. Like,
Most of the book is just like all of these characters. Like we're skipping through them, but here's the thing: all of the guys we're listing, this is like 99.8% of the population. This is like 99% of the population of the entire vampire community. Every name. Every vampire has been statted here, effectively.
Take a look at Kevin Jackson.
Well, yeah, Kevin
I know,
Jackson's a
Kevin
moneymaker.
Jackson.
Kevin Jackson's like a big mover.
Just that Bride of Frankenstein / Frankenstein hairdo.
No, it's supposed to be a fade cut. What I love is the dollar
Yeah,
side
I
etchings
love
on
the
the side
dollar
of his
signs
head.
on the side. Yeah.
Nah, Kevin.
Oh,
He's also a member of the Bloods.
yes, he is. Yeah, which is why I think Capone was he embraced by Capone or was he embraced
Nope, he was
by
one of Loden's boys actually.
Loden? Okay, because I was about to say, was it
But what
Loden
happened?
himself
What
who?
happened was Loden kind of unironically fell in his hubris, fell into the racism thing that usually ices vampires. That pissed off
Yeah,
Kevin, and now he's working with Capone.
yeah,
And Kevin actually
that's what
has
I was
And
embraced.
it's an uneasy partnership because they are both too alike in some personalities, and they're both about equally powerful.
Yep.
It does say here that Kevin did embrace people, but they're in LA. Which does
Yeah.
that violate? I don't think that violates then.
Kind of violates the rules, but kind of doesn't.
Kevin doesn't
But
give a shit.
Also, Kevin really doesn't give a shit.
Remember, he doesn't give a shit. He's plotting against his sire. That's Prince's rules, but he can kind of. The thing is, with primogens and higher ups and elites in the vampire society, you can get away with shit as long as you keep it quiet. Like,
Also,
Loden's rule may seem like iron firm, but no, it's not. It really isn't. Also, on top of this, yeah, Jackson runs the Bloods. He is their unofficial leader.
oh,
yeah.
there's also
Also,
Hacker Man.
there's Hacker Man, Bobby Weatherbottom.
No, come on. There's Joseph Peterson. By the late 1960s, he'd become disgusted with the liberal trends in journalism.
A
Oh
veteran of the most
He's
no!
reactionary days of the Chicago Tribune. Words like
Oh
objectivity and
no!
fairness were foreign to his vocabulary. Oh, so he'd fit well in modern day journalism.
he's basically a Ben
He's
Garrison.
Jordan Peterson.
Well, no.
This is way before.
Journalism.
Oh,
He's
journalism.
more like Ben Garrison
No, not Ben
if he ran a
Garrison.
newspaper.
Ben Shapiro.
He's like the previous generation's Shapiro, yeah.
Imagining Ben Shapiro as a vampire.
The only difference is
Let's say hypothetically, I want to bite your neck and suck your blood. No,
well, the
let's say
difference is
hypothetically, that's
Peterson's a lot more blunt, and he'd probably call Shapiro a homosexual.
a
Actually,
homosexual Jew. Yes.
and again, Shapiro actually probably would end up having to kill himself just because, again, Jew.
Jew. Yeah. But I
The
mean,
son. Or not the son, the can't eat blood.
can't drink blood. Anyway.
That gets ignored.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Let's be
yeah.
fair. The Beast comes out, and it's one of the very dietary restrictions. If you're a vampire, fucking first
Let's say
thing that
You're
gets
dead,
thrown out
so
the
that doesn't
window.
Let's
apply.
say hypothetically
Actually,
the beast
that's a
comes
good
out and I
question.
rip your flesh off.
Should we find a rabbi and ask him like the theological question of if you are in fact an undead creature of the night, is it okay for you to drink blood because you're already dead?
Yeah,
And
I'm going to
therefore,
say, as not a rabbi, but as a Jew, given that there are, as long as this person was probably not doing it for selfish reasons, but legitimately, yeah, I'm now undead, but I'm still a Jew. I think that probably would be permitted because there are situations where, like during, fasting, where if you need to eat or you need to break the fast to survive, you are allowed to do so.
So yeah, it's similar to how robots might not necessarily be able to be Jewish according to rabbinic law.
Or maybe,
I'm
according to
not
rabbinic
kidding. They've
law.
actually put serious thoughts onto that, which is hilarious.
We have discussed that
Yeah, and Eclipse Phase, it's really funny.
that wasn't Eclipse Phase, it
no,
was
that was
High Wire
hard.
Island.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna
Hardwired
say
Island.
There
I'm
it was.
sorry. I forgot about that book because I wanted to remember a good book.
look. All I remember about that book is that that there were Jewish robots,
Yes.
and I
Yeah,
don't want
that
to remember it for anything else.
Hardwired Island had a lot. It's basically crap. Anyway, the Hurricane. He's a guy. Here he is.
On a computer with
He's the hacker man.
4K
Yeah,
memory.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is the '90s, baby.
yeah. He's got a. It's our good old William Gibson with his hot 2 gigs of RAM.
Hmm
Here's the funny thing: because he would have been embraced at that time, he still has computers running just like that. He hasn't upgraded in years.
Yeah. Then we get
There's
the others,
Brennan.
which is just
I,
like
I'm like
a list
I'm
of.
just trying to because there's like a gajillion
Yeah.
characters.
There's like 70 vampires in this fucking book, and then they give you a list of all of their connections and their cliques, and then there's a random encounter table, which I want to get to. That's like
That's
on
the other
page.
thing. I really want to show that because, I mean, there are others like Philippe Rigaud.
Yeah,
I
if you
believe
scroll
is
past like all the
he's Sabat,
networks
or
of
no, his sire is Sabat.
You're like we're
Sorry,
just sorry.
sorry, I was just realizing that.
Yeah, like there's a
yeah,
bunch of
like
people like Rebecca who's like 2,000 plus gajillion years old.
yeah, there's a lot of this. Like there's a lot.
There's a lot. There's Prius who is trying to slay the ancient evil. There's Golfora, who actually has a lot more effort and I think might have been traced from a comic book
There
than the
she is.
others.
No, this is the succubus. This is the succubus from the Succubus Club.
Yeah, there she is. This is a demon. She is a demon. Here's
Think of
Yaryan.
yourself as Madonna in a slow motion video.
Yeah. Here's Yaryan.
And then the Codiaries.
Coteries are like how you work together. And here's all the interactions.
Yeah, this is the coteries and like the
Loden
interactions and
finds
how they interact with each
Yanga
other.
scary. She sees him as necessary. Khalid sees him as insignificant. That's neat. And it's just like
Yeah,
here's Loden's brood.
it's just
Like,
like a
let's be fair. Let's blah blah blah. The sewer rats. This is their own faction. It's under Khalid. They go into details about how the elders kind of work. This is the organization that Loden did.
yep. Again, this is all stuff like if you were going to run in Chicago, here's all the network stuff. Like this is the book that sets the high standard, right?
This
Like you
is
can see
the
where
bar.
Berlin got Night. Yeah, you can see where Berlin Night did this same thing.
Yeah, but Berlin by Night was like I don't know how to describe it. It's like if you had a blind man try to transcribe the Mona Lisa via the directions you give him. I don't know how to explain it. It's like no, I got it. It's like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where you understand the direction, but how it was executed was a trash fire that made your eyeballs bleed. Old
Yeah,
but dope. Weirdo.
yeah. The connections to some of these are great.
Whiner.
Yeah,
This is fun. Wolfpack, you get the baby chorus.
The
which are
Gary
the
The
vampire
Kindred.
kin
band.
of Gary.
Yeah, Gary, Indiana, Gary, Indiana.
The party's elite. Here's the Sabat. Yep, they're all Sabat. And apparently Sun might be in the group, which actually would explain why he has humanity 0 and still functions.
They're scouting, I think, him out.
Yep. Secret allies. Oh, check out this beautiful bit of art.
Yeah, I think
What
that's the
the
vampire from the
fuck is
start.
that?
That's like the
Vampire
vampire
got
from the
freed from
start,
the
but
statue he was placed in during torpor, and the hunters that were going to kill him are panicking.
Well,
yeah,
no, actually, because look at his chest. He's got a
Oh,
hole
they
through his.
removed the stake. They were like,
yep.
and now they're like, oh shit, what have I done?
No, these are vampires.
But yes, you have a 2d10, and you roll on those 2d10 to do a random encounter. And here's their
So,
tables.
There's the
this
beast,
is
conspiracy, desire, diablerie, fools, heroic, horror, intrigue, introduction to the masquerade, nostalgia, paranoia, premonitions, pursuit, romance, secrets, threats, vengeance, and weirdness.
so let's look at one of the themes.
Appearance 10. If you're talking about the succubus, she's a fucking succubus. What do you expect? She's a lust demon from hell.
Oh,
Yeah,
like nostalgia. You roll a 1 to 2.
Oh,
Familiar.
we're just jumping all the way down to nostalgia.
Just thought you mentioned it. I thought you passed by it.
Oh no, I'm just on the beast.
Oh, okay.
So what we
Like
got here?
again, there's stuff like the Beast. Oh yeah, you smell someone who like a child and you want to eat them.
Yep, out of character. Yeah, just their blood. A
There's
monster like me. You find a hobo that's basically crazy
yeah, and it's gonna try to attack you and
on
thinks
your
you're a
And it
demon.
life.
it, al- it also says in the parentheses where the location encounter would likely take place.
Yeah,
It's not just random, but it's also if you're in the area, that's what you would pick.
and the beast encounters are kind of echoes of what you deal with. Or
Yeah,
it's your beast lashing out to try to do things. Like you see a dark reflection in Money or Life or Monster Like Me.
I do like the monster like me. After the Kindred demonstrates obvious physical superiority, the man will rant and rave about demons that infest the city. This man is just plain crazy. He has no significance to the ongoing story.
Nope, not at all.
It's just a random
they have
character
a
that will
lot of
pop up.
again. There's a lot of this is flavor to a greater or lesser degree.
Colors, the rack. Yeah, you see a street gang brawl, and do you think you saw an individual you once knew? But the friend is struck down and basically killed. Conspiracies, which are you run into some potential plotting.
Conspiracy shit. Yeah,
It's not necessarily high level. It's like attempts to kidnap someone, like plots for that. You find a crime that was like rigged on something. It's just little
yeah,
things like that. The Art of Desire, where you feel kind of, or you might accidentally get tied into the twisted reflection of love that vampires sometimes delude themselves into thinking they can feel. Because they have emotions, sort of, but because of the transformation, it ain't right. Like it don't come out right, and that's how you do it here. Diablerie, because the quest for vampiric blood is yeah, this is something that can get you killed, either as the victim or just as a blood hunt. Like, if you do research, you might, especially because remember in Chicago by Night they mention a lot of obscure bookstores. You might accidentally
yeah.
find some forbidden lore,
You might.
such as
And
from
well, it's
Captain Harkon Manning, and you've just all you get is the records of two beastly men eating what seems to be their friend, and the character can tell this is a description of two kindred devouring the blood of an elder.
scroll across one of the pages, and the shaky black ink is a single word: Sabat.
Hmm.
There's a lot of other stuff with this, which is actually quite good. Like the ones that I really want to get into though is the fact that they included a random encounter table in the first place. Like that's just what's weird about this. Um,
Vitae stench. You accidentally stab. You accidentally fight a lake in the process. You injure them. The Vitae drives you into a dark desire.
So
Tasting
wait,
your veins.
are vampires naturally sensitive to vitae?
Vitae is like blood but greater. If you
Vitae is
are
like fucking crack
relatively, if
cocaine.
you are like if you are even remotely hungry, you have a small temptation to drink.
Your own blood?
No,
Or
But yeah, what I
no,
want to do is
let's say you have like 20 blood points, like your blood pool is 20. On like 17, you're still kind of driven to drink. And Vampire
yeah,
5th
you're
Edition actually, and you can kind of see where their hunger mechanics came from by reading Chicago by Night. It's really trying to hammer home. You're a monster in the throes of a supernatural addiction that you need. The monkey on your back, you literally need to keep on until the day you die a second time.
yeah. I think we can finish off though by going over the weirdness random encounters because they're actually quite good.
Yep,
oh,
They're like the
skipping through
last two
for.
pages.
There's heroism because, of course, some people try to be heroic. There's horror.
Hmm.
Offer you can't refute. Intrigue, introductions, which is how you can introduce people. Masquerade violations. Nostalgia. Childhood remembered. You might actually see like a reflection of yourself. Paranoia, premonitions, pursuit, romance, secrets, threats. And the way that you're supposed to use the encounters table, it's just kind of if you don't really have anything on hand or you just like want something to happen in between events in the story.
So
Which can lead to
weirdness,
further things, yes, weirdness.
rampant hell. One weekend, while strutting through the crowds of the rack, a wild-eyed old man storms the characters, yelling about hell and damnation. Will not leave the players alone no matter what they do. Will follow them if they try to escape, and can see them if they use obfuscate. Any who try to attack them will find themselves repulsed as though a giant rose-scented hand rested between them and the man. Aspects feels a bright golden aura. Uh,
This is the first. This is one of the earliest indications of true faith. This is one of the very first in vampire history, like in Masquerade. This is one of the first times they played around with true faith as a concept.
Violent, bloody death, which is someone fucking murdered a person and left them to bleed for the dogs.
Yep, a body hung by the neck swings over the street. Occasionally, the dogs leap and snap at the body. They have entered a strange form of feeding frenzy. Use of fangs and
news.
claws appear on the neck. The bulging-eyed face is completely unrecognizable. A canite took a part in this final slaying.
Bizarre voodoo. During the evening of rooftop leaping, a strange, acrid, and spicy smell leads the character to a dark corner. A gruesome sight awaits her there. A slightly scorched skull staked to a rooftop by a very elaborate wooden totem, also with its carved in the shape of a devil. Strange charms, bones, incense, and painted symbols fill a meter diameter area around the centerpiece. Upon closer inspection, the retracted fang-like canines reveal the skull to probably be that of a vampire. Research proves the symbolism to come from Haitian voodoo, that the meaning of the ritual is too archaic to be understood. This is the next one. I love this one. It's so
Okay,
stupid.
Ghoul at the zoo. The characters see a bizarre story at the 11 o'clock news. Actual television footage of an elephant at the zoo attacking and biting a keeper. Because it turns out that the
Made into a
elephant has
ghoul.
been turned into a ghoul by an anarchs.
Yeah,
Also, they gave the fucking elephant ghoul telekinetic powers.
which
I
again,
missed
Telekinetic
that bit.
elephant. Bring
Yes,
it
a
on.
telekinetic elephant ghoul.
which if in case you're wondering, again, kind of showing off that one of the concepts they came up with is you could totally make up your own disciplines. This is like a hint telling you this.
Possibly. I think this is just somebody had the idea of telekinetic elephant ghoul and wanted to include it in a book somewhere.
And it's good. Astral Visitor.
Uh, uh, a robust-looking Oriental man, approximately 30 years, dressed in priest-like robes, but he's vaguely transparent and his feet hover 6 inches off the ground. He's a Japanese vampire.
Yeah,
Versus
this is
Western.
our first introduction of the
Is
Quasian.
this a
This is a
Quajan?
Quasian.
Yes and no, Tech. Yes and no. Remember, this is really before they were made different.
Yes. This
Wait,
Japanese vampire is traveling on the astral plane, yeah.
are Quajan just Asian or is it Chinese in
They're
It
particular?
was
different.
Asian in general.
They're Asian in general, but theoretically anyone can become a
This
Cajun.
is much before they actually made them different than vampires. Originally, they
Yeah.
were just originally it's similar to how you know how there were different versions of werewolf, but they were the same thing. It's the same concept. It's basically these were actually canites back then. Quasian were not their own thing back in the first edition.
Yep, the next one is interesting as well. It's
An old love
you meet a
letter to
werewolf.
one of the first Phantom in the Opera.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. But yes, the figure watches in the open. Aspects or empathy for can actively communicate with the ghost. Though the main dialogue is them shushing the character and saying, "I want to enjoy the show. Shut up."
Hmm.
So
Is
it's
this a
actually very
wraith?
interesting that they're like, "Hey, here's a character you can throw in the opera house." Basically,
Then there's the werewolf hunting.
Yeah,
Wait, hold on. Is this Phantom of the Opera? Is this supposed to be a a wraith?
yeah, it's a ghost.
Yes,
Yeah.
that specific opera is its touchstone. It's the thing that binds it to the skin lands at all. Like the building, it holds a lot. It holds a memory to it.
Then you
Anyway,
have Hunter
werewolf.
Hunted.
And werewolves in this original time period, they gained power by eating vampires.
Oh God, it's
Possibly,
it's the
yeah.
original version of Sam Hate.
Basically, yes. You just ran into him.
Oh, by the way, if you
Uh,
actually manage to pull off killing it, you better hope you don't get this result in weirdness. Yeah, the whole pack's going to go down and down your fucking throat.
the last one though, I think is actually interesting as like a an encounter because it's like so you fed from someone who has latent psychic abilities and that activated for you for a long time. You now have Auspex 3 psychometry on at all times.
And you have no control over it.
Yeah, that's kind of a dick move result, you know.
It can be a prominent annoyance, or it could drive them insane.
Yeah,
You use unnerving experience on problem players, I think.
yeah. As is, these are great ideas to fluff up a game. It's just that it's like there's so fucking many. That's one of the things with this book is that there's a lot of it. There
Yep,
really is a lot of it. Like
they
you got
gave
your
you
money's worth
so
when you bought
much so
this.
quick.
Yeah. In terms of like again, we kind of did this because we needed a book to do, but it's at the same time.
No, no, no. I always kind of wanted to look at the OG at one point or another. I just didn't expect it to win
Yeah,
in the polls.
yeah. The this is. Yeah, I threw it out because I was like, well, it's something we could do.
Yeah, and unironically, I've at some point always wanted to look at Chicago by Night to show a good example of a setting book from the World of Darkness, because Berlin at Night by Night is not a good example, not at
Berlin by
all.
Night is a fantastic example in some areas, and then it falls flat in others.
Tech.
Like, no,
Remember when even your what's the term,
no.
Pollyanna
When I was
routine
talking about
broke?
no, when I was talking about that, I was talking about like the way that they described the city and the way they set up most of the characters was pretty good.
Well,
The
yeah,
adventure at the end of
because
the book
it's
was god
copying
fucking awful.
this. It was
Yeah,
copying this, and it worked because they actually had foot on the ground research. The problem is that's only like 50% of the book at best, and it's sandwiched between a dumb take of the history, which is actually the funny thing is you're right. It mimics Berlin by Night beat by beat, except for the butt end. Instead of the
yeah.
ass end.
There's no adventure at the end of this. There's just there's the random encounter. Berlin by Night has the worst adventure in White Wolf where
An
you get
adventure
molested by
so good
Cleopatra.
even Tech couldn't like it. In fact, it actually
No, I
drove him
never
to
liked it to begin.
rage.
I never liked it to begin with. I don't. I generally don't appreciate a lot of the adventures at the end of modules. I can find them amusing, but they're not like something that I usually would seek out, especially in the old White Wolf books, because a lot of them are well, like
Wild.
Berlin by Night. Yeah, they go a little bit into the realm of why is this in the book kind of
The
feeling.
realm of clown shoes.
Yeah, definitely the realm of cloud shoes.
Quasian were one of the inspirations for Geist, right? No,
No,
actually, Geist was always a
Geist is
spiritual
basically
sequel to
original.
Wraith.
It's Wraith is its main inspiration in terms of other lines and what it wants to do,
Now
but Geist
they
is
might have looked
its
at
own thing.
Quasian. No, they might have looked at Quasian because people. I've looked through Quasian. I've actually one of the things I've always not necessarily always, but a fun thing that might be at least worth a quick look is Kindred of the East. At least a little bit, just a little bit. It's not actually that interesting of a book in my opinion, sadly. But
The problem is that there's nothing to riff on, honestly.
well, there's just not necessarily a need to riff on everything. It's just it lacks the hardcore research in details that something like Chicago by Night has. It's a case of people loving the Orientalism of Asia without actually really understanding the Orientalism of Asia.
Yeah. No, it
Like to
gets the
give you an
flavor
idea,
across.
here's just as an example, just as a quick example. Uh, have you ever heard of Bianlan? Bianlan.
What?
Mm,
It
not
is
really.
it is an operatic art native to Sichuan, China. It is the art of face changing, where you rapidly change characters via sleight of hand during a performance. It's used in their type of opera. They don't have little touches like little insights like that. Like maybe have a equation type that has the ability to do that really quickly, like very quickly adopt a quick impersonation of another person. Tap into like actual mythos or tap into some interesting abilities. Like maybe one of the equation people can animate objects like the 99-year objects of Japanese yokai myth. But this is the 90s. They didn't have the resources we do now. The internet was fucking primitive back then. And the information on it was a lot more limited. They did pretty okay with what they had. It's just it's awkward. But anyway, back to the point. They probably did look at Quasian because Quasian had their own equivalent of a shadow. They had an upper and lower soul, and their lower soul was like their more animalistic and impulsive desires. So the kind of body sharing arrangement might have been partially inspired by that, but at its core, it's very much a Wraith sequel, a Wraith honorary sequel. Sorry, I got on that sidetrack. It's just, yeah.
But yeah. So again, your thoughts on this is like it's worth picking up and buying, and I'd agree on this. If you're
It
interested in old books, it is definitely worth picking up.
there is a love and heart in this that you don't see anymore, really. Well, I'm exaggerating a bit, but
And there's
this
also
was
the
a true passion project, and you can see it in the style, in the effort, in the resources. They statted every vampire in the entire city,
there's
including the
also
Sabbat, which
yeah,
they did not really mention.
there's also again you can see the origins for demon, wraith, werewolf, mage. That if one thing that I'm learning from this is it definitely would have been exciting when uh, World of Darkness was starting up to keep buying the books and seeing how things evolved over time.
And also, because it's so new, it's not cluttered with the meta plot nightmare, really.
They're mentioning the jihad, and that is one of the
They
characters
mentioned
of
the
the plot, but
jihad,
it's not like
they mentioned the
it's not
jihad,
really
but
it's not really Sabat versus Sabat like Camarilla though. It's more like two
it's a
Methuselahs fighting each
localized
other.
power structure, which if you're ever wondered why Chronicles of Darkness hit it off so well, after it got its retools, that's why. It focused on local problems. I think at its core, that is what damaged the World of Darkness more than anything else.
Was the global spanning meta plot?
Yeah,
Yeah, like that's kind of was always one of the issues that Old World had. And this is kind of early on the ground of Old World, and that's probably why it's like that. But again, this is also tied into a few other supplements that released around the same time, like
they
Ashes
did.
to
They
Ashes and
actually
the Suck
advertise
Club.
it. Yeah.
The Succubus Club is a book where it's sort of like they're playing around with a bunch of ideas and they're trying to see what sticks.
And
And
last but
and
not
quite
least,
frankly,
there's a strong earnestness. Like you can tell you can tell they genuinely had a strong love of what they made.
oh yeah, they were excited to make this book. They were
They
excited to do
this
something like
wasn't
this.
a job. This was enjoyment. This was passion. This was happiness.
It was
And
also fucking gonzo as shit sometimes.
oh, like the Malkavian that legitimately was controlled by a player, and it took us a bit to realize that that was his mental illness. He saw what it was. He knew he was in a game, and he's
Yeah,
being played
I
by an
was
imaginary player.
also telekinetic ghoul.
Elephant, yeah.
Yeah, like that.
Also,
Telekinetic
the
ghoul elephant is just
stereotypical
like what?
biker who just lives in a yuppie apartment and cooks eggs for his yuppie friends.
Like, like what the fuck? Like there's some character concepts in
Kevin
this where I'm like,
motherfucking Jackson, who probably has bad motherfucker like brass knuckles.
and
Like
some,
there's
and
some just
Capone.
yeah, Al Capone. Like there's some stuff in here that is definitely like
It,
when we
it's
look back on it now as gonzo
it's
and
Gonzo,
weird and
but
wild.
it's incorporated in a way that it doesn't feel like it's proud of itself. Like, look at the funny I pulled.
Yeah,
It just it
it's
lets it squat and lets you just find it.
yeah, like it's again, this is part of why I wanted to cover this book is because it is a genuinely interesting like snapshot of what was going on in White Wolf at the time and what their plans were, and also the formatting of this book, is, at least this scan, is like what the fuck.
There,
Um,
I have to repeat it. This was not. It was not a paycheck. It was not like when we read Werewolf Fifth Edition, where it's clearly you can see there's maybe a little but at the end of the day, it was more. We just gotta make it. Like
the
it.
like
It's just
it's
that
just good. Like
earnestness,
it's just a good book, and
the
that's kind of my
passion,
opinion.
level of research, quality of detail, the amount of characters that you can pull from whatever you need because you can pull them outside of the city, especially if you ignore Chronicles. The events table, the city maps, the ideas on how vampires might work, the setting details. Oh God,
Because a lot of this is that
it's.
they gave an example of what they had in the core book, and they showed how it works in actual action, right? Like,
I
because
heartily
think
recommend you get this as a. You actually, I honestly think it's not quite required, but it's up there. This is an amazing book. This is one of the best books we've ever looked at on this show. I wholeheartedly believe this is one of the best books we've looked at on the show.
and again, the only complaint I really have is that the formatting is ass. But like, it's
That
certainly White Wolf. It's
it's
going to look like
the
awful in
formatting is
terms of
odd,
formatting.
and the copy of the PDF we have is not the highest quality, but you can tell from the person who scanned it that this book has been used so much that you can see the ripples in the page. And there's a reason for that.
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps it up for tonight for our lore rambling on Chicago by Night. Get it if you want it. It's worth your
Seriously,
money.
get it. Get it. First
At the
edition,
very least, is a
first edition I'd hardly recommend. I would also probably say second edition if you really want a more a version that gels probably better with the more modern like 20th anniversary take.
yeah. I mean, you could also use this with 20th anniversary, no problem.
Oh,
Like a lot
easily.
of the stuff
Yeah.
converts right over.
Easily.
And don't forget and ignore fifth. I'm looking at it right now. Sun has humanity 2 for some reason.
Well, I
That
guess that
that's a
I don't
that's a
know if he had it
rework.
in
No, that
what's a
was a
That
rework
rework
to make him.
when they worked on whites and going, wait, how the fuck is he functional?
Yeah,
yeah,
that's one of those
that's
things where this is a we don't want to put him on a path, and he's not really zero because there's a lot of characters in this book that have zero humanity, honestly, where it's like okay, but that doesn't work like that anymore. But they wanted to show that they were now completely inhuman, where roads and things would come into play for that later on to show that, but they didn't have that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
so
So
they also removed that Evan guy, the variable stats.
Well, that's
okay, I
because
can understand
that's
that.
a prototypical. Like, here's the thing: your complaints actually make sense with the changes in mechanics, especially in fifth edition, which is a complete rework from Beyond 20th.
Yeah, and also the having variable stats for a character like that that's supposed to be like a
It's a,
GM guide is
it's a pain in the ass for the storyteller.
like what do you mean by that? Do I have to create like a 50 stats for this guy that you've created
How
for
many
me here?
points do
And
I
it's like
got? Is there an upper limit on how I
what's
distribute
their
it?
baseline? Like how do I distribute this? Is it like by character creation rules? Like I can see why it's a decent idea. I can also see why they didn't do it
It's a
again.
great idea. I understand why they abandoned it though.
Yeah.
And reminder, I actually think fifth edition is some old horse shit. I do. I genuinely think the feeding mechanics, while I understand the mechanical logic behind it, actually cripples the game. I also fuck KTIF blood alchemy. Fuck that. Fuck your thin blood alchemy. Also, you really had to combine the clans that did dead magic into one fucking thing? Okay, okay.
Well, I
But anyway, yeah,
I think
back to a book that actually made me smile quite a bit throughout this entire.
So you quite enjoyed this. Imp said I think you enjoyed it as well, and I definitely
Oh yeah.
did like looking over this again because it's been a while since I read this,
It,
like a long while.
it was a good thing we did this. So let's think. I don't want to balance it out with a crappy book because I don't want to ruin it.
Finish up Eclipse phase.
Hell no. How about we finish up the book of our complete arcane? And if not, we'll do Eclipse Face because that's also pretty fun. Yeah, I scream about the anarchists, but that's just because it's written from the point of view of anarchists, and they don't understand that their ideology also has flaws, and they don't actually account for it.
They kind
There's
of
still a
do
there's
in
still a
Eclipse
passion
Space.
in research. They have a passion in research into it, so that's why it balances out. Like it is genuinely good. It's just
Mhm.
not as I wouldn't say it's as good as this particular book. We'll see. It's a coin flip between complete arcane. It depends on if the diopsid can crawl out of his hive. So with that, have an excellent night. Don't get eaten by a werewolf on Amtrak or screamed at by a crazy guy who believes that you're the devil. It's not gonna go well for you.
I remember.
Also watch out for a serial killer looking motherfucker with pale hair.
And I remember. Chicago deep dish pizza is the best pizza.
Chicago deep dish pizza is the third best pizza.
To stop this from going any longer, good night, everyone.